file system was written in Fortran and it blown up, so I had to fix it.
Running on their personal computer. Is there a way they can make a report?
I don't think so.
They can make a what?
A recording.
No, only.
I think it's a security issue.
Only the host?
Oh, well, unless he gives us the permission.
Huh.
And how do I give you that permission?
No, I thought maybe.
I think when you go into Zoom, there are preferences and attributes.
I thought maybe there is a way to do it locally on your not on the Zoom website, but
I understand that.
and I still think there is, if you activate some kind of a recorder.
Well, but yesterday I tried to do that, and I had to get permission from him.
No, not on Zoom. On your personal computer, you should have some kind of a recording.
Oh yeah,
software.
No, people do have those things.
Yeah. But not in Zoom.
No. Well, in Zoom, if we give permission, they can record.
Oh, interesting.
But if we can record now, no. But what I've done in the past, I record the session and then I post a link to the recording.
To the recording, which is good.
That's exactly what I want to do. That is exactly what I want to do. So.
Okay, so I have a bunch of email here from people.
Now I want to share my screen.
Did your student ever get back to us?
Sirisha?
Mm-hmm.
No. So I was actually just trying. I honestly just want to graduate her.
I know.
And the way I think is the case is Amy needs to agree. She was not satisfied last night. So.
Okay. So here's Stephanie McKinney's comments. So she'd had her students working on Codeorg all last year, completing it. So I guess they did it little bits at a time.
Yeah.
So last night she explored the BJC and she found similarities. Do they use BJC on Codeorg? And that BJC is a little more advanced.
Oh, interesting perspective. Okay, what is wrong with me?
So I better write to all of them because Carla wants a link for today.
Oh, of course.
You're okay with the two students from Jim? I thought his wife was going to join us already.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I mean, I would think it's totally fine, but I can see it like school policy.
Bless you. Do you still have the email I sent to them yesterday? I can't find it. Send it to me so I have the list, please.
Oh, log on is
I know it's somewhere on the.
Probably don't have it in the list you sent me because it's going to be under BCC, right?
BJC? Oh, BCC. Yes, that's right. That's why I don't have it. Okay. Do you have something that has all the domains at the top? Can you
Yes,
send that to me?
I have.
I know I have it here someplace. It's in here.
This is what I have. I don't know if you've added anybody.
No, I didn't add anybody. I just checked it.
All right.
Hoffman was on the right list.
I was hoping it was somewhere in here. So I just cut past that.
Morning. How are you? Good.
It's 8:11. It's 8:11.
806.
I'm 5 minutes ahead of myself. Something on the list.
Hey, Trace. How are you? You diehards. I know.
Good morning.
You're way early.
I thought I was going to be late.
I'm like, give me a city back. You know, give me here.
Kind of sneaking in a UW meeting at the same time. So. Hopefully this will all work out.
Well, which one is 91? 91. Is that what it's supposed to be? Yeah. I'm well down to like 8 tomorrow and then of course it is. I'm like ready for hot. Not like scorching hot. I don't think I've ever seen the mountain as green as it is right now. I mean, it is truly very green and
I'm happy at 80s. It could just stay 70s and 80s.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, Marcy, is available today? No. So what is Ruby's extension? Thank you.
Like someone's, so I'm gonna just prep them for that, but it's that so it just takes minutes. So then Well, we'll find out. We'll find out. Katie, Davey, what are you doing? Hello, how are you, Tina? Fantastic. How's your summer going? Great, how about you? Good. You staying busy? Yeah? Give me a side to seats here. What'd you find?
I read a trick to do
I belong to this word of the day. I love it. Great.
Yes, I like that one.
How did you?
These people
What's good? Which one? I got back from, are you talking about the Israel? Yes, when I got back.
you heard about it? No, you don't get the paper.
Oh, the little incident.
I wonder how your trip went.
They're both fantastic.
Good.
I'm
Good.
gonna do a parking lot.
Sure.
Okay.
That was
And
highly unfortunate.
Let's go ahead and do two.
Okay.
All right.
All right, should we get started?
Yeah.
Now I just gotta find myself here.
Where's your summer been?
Oh, I was already.
No.
Can you do that? So that you project to everybody's screen.
I think I am.
Okay.
I'm actually sharing my screen. I'm sharing my screen. All right, let's kind of get started. I want to mute your speakers if you're here. My next question was whether you could hear me, and I think I just answered that. So that's oh, did they, huh?
Hey.
I'll wait for him. Don't quite know how to. I don't even know what computer is logged in as. Anyway, so
How are you doing? Good. How are you?
do we have any issues to go over at the beginning, or are we ready to dive in?
On top of
Sorry,
I think we are ready.
we are ready to dive in. Okay, so today's it's actually a really huge topic.
It will be okay, I
About
promise.
abstraction, and we're going to try to cover abstraction in one day, which is
Did you find Oh.
optimistic. Okay.
How are you?
So there are actually, well, I guess the first thing I want to say about abstraction is this. Abstraction is one of those words that are common words that we use in just the English language when talking to each other. And that's great, but that can be misleading because we bring a lot of intuition as to what we're talking about. And sometimes we forget that we're actually talking about a technical topic, right? So an example of that is from physics, where words like force, momentum, energy, they're regular everyday words. We know what they mean, right? But if you take that approach to your physics course, then you get in trouble very, very quickly, right? Because it's like, what do you mean no energy is being spent? So that's a warning, okay? So in computer science, when we talk about abstraction, we're generally talking about two different things. The first one is that abstraction is just a way of hiding details, okay? And I got some examples so that I can try to let you know what I mean when I use that word, okay? So here's my first example. Mute. There we go. Okay, so here's kind of the first example, and that is the mental model that you build of something that you're familiar with, but not intimately familiar with, right? So, for example, we've all had the experience of going to a restaurant, ordering food. Hey, Dan, you might want to kill your speakers. We go to a restaurant, we order food, and
Especially
the
when
food
it comes to
appears,
French
right? We
fries.
eat, we pay, we leave, right? And that gives you some kind of an idea of what a restaurant is, right? I would call that a restaurant abstraction. And you can think of that as a place that you go, somebody sits you down somewhere, right? Here's your table. And they bring you a menu, you get to order. After a while, you get food, you can eat, you're no longer hungry, you pay, you leave, right? That's everything you need to know about. Now, my sister-in-law actually was a waitress at a high-end restaurant, and that's how she paid her way through college. And so she has a very different model of what a restaurant looks like. And when I talk to her about it, she tells me about people that I didn't know existed, like runners, right? And she says that in really fancy restaurants, the waiter or waitress does not bring you your food. A runner will do that. And so they'll go to the kitchen, grab the food, come over, and then they'll head back and take care of somebody else. And of course, as a white person, she wanted to make sure that her tables are the first that have the food appear, right? So how do you do that? You share your tips with the runners, right? So that is part of the restaurant world that, as a client of a restaurant, which most of us would be, we simply wouldn't know, right? Until she told me that, I was actually unaware of the fact that the person bringing me the food was not the person that I had ordered from, right? Now, that's something about my powers of observation. But I simply wasn't aware of that. It's like they came and food appeared, yay, I can eat, right? And it simply wasn't something that I was conscious of, right? There's lots of other things that are happening, quote, behind the scenes that we just don't know about, right? And by and large, that's okay, right? Because we don't need to know how the restaurant is run. We are customers, right? So that's abstraction happening in kind of an everyday setting. You can imagine that there's lots of those kinds of things that happen all the time, okay? Here's an abstraction, which is one of the great abstractions of all time. And it's one that I'm actually pretty excited about because my son is taking his driver's test this afternoon. Everybody, please, okay, cross your fingers because I'm actually going to have to go get him from the high school in the middle of the morning. So as soon as he gets his license, I don't have to do that anymore. So that'll be great for all of us. But anyway, driving a car, it used to be that the things that you did, right, to the car actually did mechanical stuff that would go to the wheels, right? I mean, when you were pushing the gas pedal, that was actually opening a valve, right? Everything was direct, okay? If you turned the steering wheel, that was actually physically turning the wheels, right? Now, then we started having things like, honestly, the whole technology stack changed, right? We started having things like power steering, okay? So now you turn the wheel, and doesn't directly go to the front wheels. It's okay. It might just be hydraulics, right? But it means that you're not actually turning the wheels. You're pressing some kind of a hydraulic lever. And then, of course, we started putting computers on these things. I mean, I'm skipping a few generations, right? But a regular car today is running around with dozens of computers, okay? And it's kind of sad because they develop independently, so they don't necessarily talk to each other, which is frightening. But you have like some computers whose only job in the world is just to monitor this wheel and make sure that the wheel is happy, right? So now when you turn, you're actually simply telling some computer, I would like to turn. And then the computer talks to the wheel and says, okay, we want to turn. How are you feeling about that? Okay, oh, you're spinning. Okay, you're out of this. Never mind, right? Oh, you're actually really doing great. You feel friction. Awesome. I want you to turn like this, right? That's not what we are aware of, right? We're still using the same inputs that they used 100 years ago, right? We're still driving the same way, right? It's too much to actually argue that somebody who learned how to drive 100 years ago could just start driving today, right? But probably they'd be okay as long as we didn't like send them to the interstate, right? Just one big parking lot, they would survive, right? So that's kind of the power of the abstraction, right? This is what I want to do. This is how I accomplish that. How it actually happens is not something that I'm aware of, right? It might not even be something that I care about, right? by the way, I fly small planes. And in small planes, when you turn, for example, the yoke, you are actually pulling cables that are literally physically moving the tail of the plane, right? So that's going back. Well, most of the planes that you can afford to fly are about 30, 40 years old, right? So you really are using that old technology. If you're flying commercial, the pilot might be turning a wheel of some sort, right? But it's just telling a computer, this is what I want you to do, right? It's just a way of letting some computer know your intent, right? And it will take care of the actual flying, if you will. Okay. So that's another abstraction. I want to say that this is true about a lot of what are known as user interfaces, right? User interface abstract kind of the functionality of some system, right? And just simply give you a way to interact with it and get things done without needing to know too much about the details, right? Really good user interfaces do that, right? And just kind of as an aside, a really good user interface could be a person, right? So I tend to think, for example, of an executive assistant as a really good user interface. So you say something, I want this budget to be taken care of, right? You're the executive, you get the big bucks, and your executive assistant actually takes care of the budget, right? So, so that's fantastic, right? That's the way that a lot of companies operate, right? Academic departments, department heads are important. The department assistant, that's the person in charge, right? If you want something done, that's who needs to be your friend. And I don't know this firsthand, but I had a friend who was an officer in the Navy, and he tells me that the captain stands, and they call it a boat in a submarine, right? It's not a boat, but what the heck. And the captain of the boat will say, I want you to do this. Like, for example, I want you to dive to 1,000 meters, right? And then there's actually another officer who's in charge of the commands. And in between them is a third officer who listens to the captain's orders and then translates it into, oh, I want you to do this to the controls. And then somebody else actually does that to the controls. So there's like 3 people involved in actually, turning the boat or diving the boat or doing anything with the boat. And what you're seeing there is abstraction, right? The captain is trying to keep 50 things or more in his head at once, right? And so doesn't want to deal with exactly what you have to do to the boat to get it to do something, right? Okay, so simply issues an order, makes a decision. This is what I want you to do. Somebody else translates it into slightly more detailed information. And then there's a person that actually is physically guiding the boat. So abstractions. Now, that's one part of abstraction. Here's the other way, the other aspect of abstraction. And like I said, this is in technical terms, right? The other one, I like to think of it as generalization, okay? And that's something that as teachers, we try really hard to get our students to learn, right? So I'm gonna think of what I consider to be probably one of the hardest jobs in the entire world, and that's teaching Algebra 1, okay? Because when you're trying to do something like that, you want to teach the students, for example, how to solve, x plus 3 equals 7, right? And that's really, really hard for 2 reasons. Number one, we know the answer immediately, right? Number 2, students can usually figure out the answer immediately. They don't need to solve that. They see that and go, well, duh is 4, okay? But they're missing something important, which is we're not trying to teach them how to solve x plus 3 equals 7. We're trying to teach them how to solve equations that have, 50 terms on one side. And we're simply trying to teach them the methods, right, that will work for that in examples that are small enough that they can do without freaking out, right? So, it's a very delicate balance. If I give you one that's too complicated, you go, it's too hard, I can't learn. If I give you one that's too easy, you go, yeah, I know the answer, so I don't need to learn what you're teaching me, right? So you're always constantly trying to fight that. Now, what we want is for them to be able to eventually get to the point, right, that somewhere in the back of their head, unconsciously, they have 10 techniques that they know, right? Maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 6, okay? But just a handful of techniques. And they can use the right one when you give them a new problem they haven't seen before, right? That's the goal. At that point, you've learned algebra, you can forget everything I taught you in this class and just go with your instinct, right? Because you're gonna be taking harder classes where they expect you to be able to do that, okay? So that's where we wanna get to, right? And really what I want to say is that what we're trying to teach them is a higher level concept, right? Not kind of a low level, this is how you solve this equation, right? If all your students can do is, I know what this is quadratic, so there's a formula, I remember it, boom, go, right? Oh, I know what this is. This is when you're adding something on the right-hand side. I need to move it to the left, right? If that's your ultimate level of knowledge, you won't survive calculus, right? You know, but on the other hand, that's what we're teaching, right? Because that's how you learn. Those are the steps to you know, the grados ad parnassum, I guess, right? But, you know, the steps to mastery of the subject, because you got to do these things to get to this higher level. What's that higher level? That's when you abstracted all of these stuffs and generalized it so that it's not so specific, right? What is this, right? Oh, that is it's not a quadratic equation, but if I move the constant over to this side, then it becomes one, right? No, it's just an equation, right? That's what I want you to think. You abstracted it high enough that it's just an equation and I got a bunch of tools that I can throw at it to solve it, right? That's what we want them to learn. So again, it's that generalization process that the abstraction is all about, okay? So here are some kind of common examples of abstractions. In biology, right? So we might actually classify animals into things like mammals and reptiles and amphibians and things like that, right? Those are abstractions, right? So what's an amphibian, right? You know, that's a biology question, right? Well, let's see, I probably have it wrong. It's been, okay, we're not talking about how long it's been. Many years since I did that.
Last week I spent with biologists, they're gonna redo all of that stuff.
I know. The whole tree of life is gone. Now it's a circle, isn't it? Circle of life. That sounds better anyway. But yeah, you know, still, we may keep some of that old abstraction concepts, right? And okay, so what does an amphibian have? It's got some properties, right? And some of the properties appear to be that it can live in water on land, it splits its time. I don't quite remember whether amphibians lay their eggs in the water, right? And I think that's the difference between amphibian and reptile. Not sure, right? The abstraction is not clear in my mind, okay? Thank God I'm not a biologist, but it's there, it's real, right? And that's part of what you learn in Biology 101, or used to learn in Biology 101, okay? The musical instruments, right? You know, I like the orchestra, right? And when you're in an orchestra, right, then you're divided into sections, right? And the instruments themselves are kind of classified in different ways. So here is one classification that you have. You have keyboard instruments, right? Okay, so what is that? That would be my piano, that'd be my harpsichord, that'd be my organ, right? You know, those are keyboard instruments. I have wind instruments, you know, trumpet, saxophone. I have, you know, all sorts of horns, you know, French horn, English horn, all sorts of stuff. I might have the flutes, right? You know, all sorts of, quote, wind instruments. I have string instruments, you know, the violin, the viola, the cello, right, the bass. I have percussion instruments, you know. I actually don't know what they're called. They're just percussion instruments, and they get very creative. It's like things hanging from a string that I don't know what they do, but it sounds beautiful. So you know, that's another kind of instrument, right? Now here's a really deep question. Is the piano a percussion instrument or a string instrument? Okay. Now, I used to play the piano, right? And really badly. I mean, even my dog
Just
would
like
cry
biology,
when I
right?
practiced. You know, yeah, it was. My dog would be like, "Oh, please don't." But you know, I played enough to kind of learn something about it. So I learned that there's white keys and black keys, and you hit them and something plays, right? It turns out to be very different than, say, the harpsichord. Okay, the harpsichord is around the time of Bach. That was the primary keyboard instrument, right? Now, the way that the harpsichord works is when you press the key, there's kind of a little quill that goes up, and it grabs one of the strings in the harpsichord and plucks it, okay? So think about a harp, right? How do you play a harp? You know, you pluck the strings. That's exactly what a harpsichord is, except instead of plucking them with your finger, you're pressing a button that does the plucking, okay? One simple consequence of that is that you can't have soft and loud when you play a harpsichord. It's just plucking. So it's always the same volume, right? Okay, so then we have the piano. The way the piano works is you press the key, same user interface, right? And what actually happens is that first of all, something lifts, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a mute. Okay, that lets the string vibrate, and then a hammer comes up, boom, and hits the string. Okay, one consequence of that is that if I hit the key harder, the hammer comes up harder. The string sounds louder. Okay, if I place, with not as much force, the hammer comes up just a little bit. Okay, it doesn't sound as loud, right? Same user interface, but now we have different results. So you can actually argue, and musicians will argue this, that say a harpsichord is really a string instrument, right? Because it's played the same way as, say, a harp, right? Or for that matter, it's played very similarly to the way a violin is played when you're playing pizzicato, right? Where you pluck in the strings, right? So it's like, okay, so that's kind of a string instrument, I guess. And what about the piano? Oh, I got hammers striking chords, right? Or wires. That's a percussion instrument, okay? Because that's how we make percussion music. When I was learning piano, actually, my teacher one time chose a piece that was absolutely horrible. Okay, it was beautiful. It's this Brazilian music, but it was not the kind of music that I liked. I like long flowing melodies, Chopin, that kind of stuff. And this was something where you quite literally just banged on the piano. She was like, I want you to understand what the instrument really is, right? It's not a violin. It's a drum set. Okay. So, like I said, musicians can actually argue about that, right? The organ, same user interface, right? It's actually more complicated. It's got a keyboard on the top for your hands, and it's got a keyboard on the bottom for your feet. But how does it play music? It's got a big reservoir of air, and it blows that air through pipes. So it's actually a wind instrument, right? But the user interface is that of a keyboard instrument. So which one is it? Okay. The reason that I kind of wanted to bring that up is because I want you to realize that abstractions can be different even among the same things, right? So if I think of the user interface, those are keyboard instruments. That's how they're played, right? The bass is played very similarly to the violin, right? Okay, the violin's up on your shoulder, the bass is sitting down here and you're standing next to it, right? But ultimately you got some kind of a bow and you're running that over the strings, and with the other hand, you're choosing the notes, right? It's very, very similar, same family, right? The organ is very similar to the piano in that sense, and to the harpsichord, right? Even though they have very different mechanisms inside, which can actually affect their tone quite a bit, or their sound. Pianists, for example, are horrible at the organ, because when you lift your fingers off of an organ, that note stops playing, because the finger is actually opening up the valve that lets the air flow, right? Whereas with piano, you lift your finger, and so the hammer is no longer striking it, but of course still vibrating, so there's still sound coming out, right? So, pianists get a little sloppy with their fingering technique, and when you hear somebody who's a real pianist playing on an organ, you'll hear very choppy sound. That's because the habits are exposed. So anyway, do we classify them by the way people play them or by the way they make sound? And you'll get different answers, right? Which classification is right? Depends on what you're trying to do, right? So two different abstractions for the same thing. All right, I got a different abstraction that I want to talk about. And here are some examples of things: bicycles, motorcycles, cars, trucks, RVs, buses, and so on, right? If you gave that to a kid, right, they might actually not know the word, but I think they would classify those in the same way. These are vehicles that you see on the road, right? That are road vehicles, just in general. Okay, that's a good kind of classification. Now here's another set of things. Airplanes, helicopters, boats, submarines, right? Do we want to consider those as vehicles too? Okay. I wasn't sure. I checked the dictionary. And the dictionary says that vehicles are, well, things that transport people or goods on land. Okay, so never mind the boats, never mind the planes. On the other hand, I have seen the phrase unmanned aerial vehicle, right? UAV to be, it's a drone, okay? I have also seen autonomous underwater vehicle, AUV, right? And that's a submarine type drone, right? So if you take those phrases literally, then it means that boats, planes, presumably helicopters, right, can all be vehicles as well, right? So our abstraction is a little bit bigger. Perhaps what we have here is an abstraction called vehicle, right? And then we have two sub-abstractions. Terrestrial vehicle, aquatic vehicle, air vehicle, right? And they would have different properties, right? Very different control systems, right? So yeah, that might be an important abstraction. By the way, now I'm refining my abstractions, right? Vehicle is the top level abstraction, but I found different categories that fit inside it, okay? And then of course, I think, how about horses? If I look at the definition, Merriam-Webster, okay? You know, it is something that carries people or goods on land. Horse satisfies it. Mule definitely satisfies it, right? So are those vehicles? I don't think Merriam or Webster would say yes, okay? I don't know how I feel about that, right? In a long ago biology class, I know that, defining mammals, like, okay, they have hair, awesome. They give milk, awesome. Coconut, right? Mammal has hair, gives milk. No, right? So we have to work in our definition of abstractions and exactly what we mean by that. And by the way, that comes from, okay, what exactly do I mean by vehicle, right? What exactly do I mean by mammal? Those kinds of things affect us in code, right? Where we build abstractions, and we have to be very precise. This is what this abstraction is, right? And sometimes, okay, almost all of the time, as the program develops, right? Which is, in fact, the only time that this is not true is for student programs, right? Which is so hard to teach this, right? Because in the student programs, they are just a little bit of code, done over a very short span of time, boom, done, right? But in any kind of a real world situation, the same code just keeps growing and the project gets longer and longer, right? So abstractions that you thought were right at the beginning of time when you were writing the code end up being wrong, and we have to adapt them somehow, right? So that's pretty common. Okay, one last thing that I want to say about that is this. There's kind of some overlap between the two kinds of abstractions that I gave you. I talked about hiding information, hiding things, hiding details, okay? And I talked about generalizing, right? It may well be that in order to generalize, you're going to hide some details, right? So they're very related. So, when I talk about, critters that are moving across my picnic, right? Well, the critters might actually be things like ants, right? They might actually be things like spiders, okay? And yeah, there's a category that I can use. They're all insects, but maybe that's not what I mean, right? Have different numbers of legs. They have different body types, all sorts of stuff that I'm just simply, these are just things that ruin my picnic. That's my abstraction, right, for that purpose. So I may want to ignore certain details like number of legs in order to be able to consider them the same thing, right? So they go together, right? So this whole idea of hiding details versus generalizing is kind of useful, but it's certainly not the whole story, right? So it's just something you want to keep in mind, right? Okay. Yesterday you guys did the hour of code, and you got some experience with what is known as turtle graphics, okay? The turtle graphics is actually has abstractions just left and right, okay? So I really want to talk about it because I want you to be able to see the abstractions around you, right? And I think that's the best way to learn what we mean by this technical term. So you may be familiar with Preview, a very old programming language called Logo. If you're not, look it up. It's actually a great deal of fun. It is outdated in the sense that everything Logo did, Snap does, right? And then more, right? So it's certainly outdated, but that's still fun. And Logo introduced this whole notion of a turtle, right? And in Logo, which is, oh, God help us, it was like early 80s.
Yeah, but it lasted a long time.
It lasted a long time. It was a great.
It goes back to the 70s.
Which one?
70s, I think.
Seven. Oh my God, even worse. The turtle was actually nothing more than a triangle.
There was a physical turtle.
Oh, there-
I bought one, there was a big one.
Yeah.
FYI.
Oh, I know. I'm actually going to use that, right? Because that's part of the whole abstraction business, right? And it's just what exactly is the turtle that is graphicing, right? And in the screen, it would be a triangle or an arrowhead. You know, that's what it looked like. It's not an equilateral triangle. That's actually important because you want to see which direction it's moving, right? So it could be like an isosceles triangle, very, very skinny. So you could see, oh, it's going that way, okay? And the turtle had a current position, so you could see where it is, right? And he had a current direction, right? It's going in that way. And so there were some commands associated with the turtle. There are things that you can tell the turtle to do. And you'll recognize these commands. You can tell it to move forward by so many steps, okay? So you can say forward 100, and it would move forward 100 steps. You could tell it to move backward by so many steps, okay? So this is not a real turtle, right? Not a biological turtle, because for one thing, biological turtles don't follow directions very well. So, and I don't believe they can walk backwards. I don't know that. Can they walk backwards? I don't know.
If they have
I had a turtle. Actually, I have many turtles named Fred, but I could never train a single one of them. So now you could tell it to turn left or turn right by so many degrees, okay? And then the turtle actually carried a pen with it, okay? And the pen could be in two positions. It could be up, so it would just carry a pen while it was walking, or it could be down, which means that it would put the pen down on a paper while it was walking. And if it does that, it leaves a trail behind it, right? So that was the abstraction, okay? Go ahead.
turtles can walk backwards.
They can walk backwards. Okay, well, there you go. There you go. Like I said, biology, not my strong point, okay? Now, I want to, quote, count the ways that this makes up an abstraction, okay? First is just the entire turtle concept, right? And how can I count that as an abstraction? Well, it generalizes many different kind of turtles, right? So in Logo, kind of the original turtle was the triangle that I was talking about, right? But once people started playing with it and liked it, they built a physical turtle, like Lynn says, right? And this physical turtle would actually go on the floor, and you could send the directions, right? And it would move, right? Today, we actually have many choices of physical turtles. There is something called a turtle bot that you can bring to the classroom that you can actually program in Python, and off it goes, and you can tell it to do things. One that I've used with kids is something called a scribbler robot, and that it's actually kind of like a disk, except it has a hole in the middle where you can put in a kind of like a felt pen, and it just goes down and leaves a mark, or up and doesn't, right? So it's actually same commands, totally different technology. We actually have turtle graphics in Snap, and it's done through the sprites, right? So you have a sprite, and you can give the sprite directions such as move, put your pen down, put your pen up, and they will behave in that way, okay? Sprites are even more powerful. Not only can they do that, they can do all sorts of other things. So this logo concept has now been generalized, right? So yet another level of abstraction. Sprite, which is higher than simply turtle, right? And it does all those things, right? So same user interface, lots of different backend implementations. That is an example of abstraction, okay? So turtle graphics is great for that, okay? Now, that was generalization. I'm also going to tell you that the turtle hides information, okay? So the information that it's hiding is data that it needs to be able to do its job, right? What is his job? Turn, forward, backward, right? That's his job. So it needs some information, and it's hiding that from us, right? So what kind of information does it need? It needs to know where it is and which way it's looking, right? Its position and its direction. It actually needs to know that. It also needs to know whether the pen is up or down, right? Just physically, right? If for no other reason than when you say pen up, if the pen is already up, it doesn't try to raise it higher, right? So, it probably needs to know the current state position of the pen, okay? There are more complex turtles that you could imagine, right? Oh, it's got a pen and it moves and it draws. What if I had a colored pen? you know, red or blue or any kind of color. Okay, so now I need to know what color my pen is, right? So that I leave a line of the right color. Shoot, I would like to have a really thin pen, a little wider pen. Okay, fine, here we go. Now we need to know the size of the pen. Hey, you know, when I cut a corner, I actually want to have really, you know, pointy corners. I want to have round corners. The shape of the pen now needs to be one of the things that he knows about, right? So we could actually have more complex turtles that have more information that they're hiding from us. Okay. I talked about position and I talked about direction. Okay. So how do we store that information? Let's see. With position, rectangular coordinates, Cartesian coordinates on X and a Y. That seems pretty reasonable, right? Why is it reasonable? Because this is the first one we learned, okay? There are other things that are also reasonable. I would like to know how far I am from some starting location and in what direction I am from that starting location. We call those polar coordinates, right? So maybe we could use that. Maybe we could use any one of totally different ways that we come up with to do this, right? If nothing else, we can change the size, right? When I say forward 100, what do I mean? Is that 100 meters? 100 centimeters? In a computer screen, it's probably 100 pixels, okay? If I have a bot that's roaming on the carpet, it might actually be 100 inches, right? But you know, that's different ways of storing this information, okay? Oh, shoot. Direction. Obvious decisions to make. Do I store that using radians or do I store that using degrees, right? Does it matter? No, right? Absolutely doesn't matter, but you got to pick one, right? How do I measure direction, right? If you're a mathematician, you take the positive x-axis and you go counterclockwise. There's your direction, right? Physicists do it that way too. If you're a sailor or a pilot, then you go to true north and then you go clockwise, right? And that's how you actually measure direction, right? Why? I have no idea, okay? But there's two ways to do it that I can think of, and trust humans to actually use both of them in different circumstances, right? So yeah, again, what is my turtle doing? I don't know. I don't need to know, right? That's what abstraction does for us, okay? Honestly, that's why it's so cool, okay? All right. And now comes the big one, forward, okay? Forward. I tell the turtle forward 100 and it moves 100 steps, okay? On the screen, those steps, like I said, are pixels. You know, they're just the dots on your screen, literally, okay? All right. I'm saying that that instruction is a really huge and huge capital abstraction, okay? There are some other names for instruction. I could, for example, call it a procedure. I could call it a function. I could call it a method, okay? And whichever one of those words I use actually just betrays your background, okay? You know, where did you learn about this stuff first, all right? So those of us who learned how to program in the long time ago have a tendency to talk about procedures and functions, okay? My students always use the word method because they use object-oriented programming. That's all they've seen. That's all we teach them. And so they think it's a method, right? They're all the same thing, okay? Procedures, functions, methods, they all mean the same thing. And they're just a way of abstracting. What are they abstracting? Here's something I want you to do, and I really don't want to know how you're going to get it done, okay? I'm just giving you an order. Go forward, right? Is it hard? Don't care. Is it easy? Good for you. Just go forward, right? That's the abstraction, okay? So let's take a look. I just want you to you know, kind of let you see behind the scenes a little bit, not too much, okay? But just a little bit as to what this turtle has to do, all right? This turtle actually looks pretty dumb. It can only do 6 things if you count left and right as 2 different things, right? But it's actually really, really smart, okay? And quite possibly, I am not kidding, okay? And I'm not trying to speak badly of my students. My students are fantastic, okay? But my students could probably not program the turtle if I asked them to, okay? They can use the turtle just fine. But if I said, programming assignment, implement turtle, they would fail, okay? They wouldn't know how to do it, Okay, so let me show you why this is so hard. Okay, the turtle, what does it know? Here's where I am. I'm at position 1020. I'm assuming Cartesian coordinates. Okay, right? I'm just assuming that. Maybe it makes a different choice, but let's just pick one. Okay, I'm at 1020, and my heading is 30 degrees from true north. So I've taken the sailor pilot perspective that 0 is north, 30 degrees is somewhat southeast. Okay, all right. I tell the turtle to move forward by 98 steps. 98 is chosen carefully. All right, and I may be wrong. I'm going to have the mathematicians in the room double check my numbers, but that is, like I said, I chose it carefully. Okay, all right. So what does it do? Well, we know what it does. It's going to move 98 steps in the direction of 30 degrees, right? That's well understood, okay? Right, I think, right? This is a lot more complicated because what the turtle does, this is the virtual turtle, right? It actually lives in a world, it's a computer screen, right? And a computer screen is actually a great abstraction in its own right, okay? Because it is actually a two-dimensional array. You can call that a matrix if you want, okay? Of things called pixels, right? And pixels are things that have colors, right? I'm gonna ignore the colors and just simply assume that a pixel can be on or off, okay, right? In reality, pixels are, well, they have shades of gray, right? Not just on or off. And forget gray, they have shades of red, green, and blue, okay? But let's just say on or off for each pixel, okay? And I have a two-dimensional array of them, right? In this particular screen that I'm looking at is about 780 this way, okay, vertically, and about 1,000 this way, okay? But let's just say that it's 1,000 by 1,000, okay? All right, there is no moving turtle, right? We've been talking about the turtle moves forward, it moves backward, it turns. There is no moving turtle, okay? This is like the Matrix, right? You know, you can't understand this until you realize there is no spoon. There is no moving turtle. It is a collection of dots on the screen that are lit. Okay, that's the turtle, right? When I tell it to move, let's assume that the pen is down. I'm asking it to leave a trail, right? What am I really asking it? I want some of the pixels in the screen to become on, right? So what does forward 98 actually means? It means figure out what pixels I need to turn on so that the user sees something that looks like a line. By the way, there are no lines, okay? Or let me rephrase that. There are vertical lines, there are horizontal lines. There are no lines that go at an angle. Why? Because I have a two-dimensional array of pixels, right? If I want to go at, say, 30 degrees, shoot, you know, if I'm in a geometry course, that's an infinite number of of points, right? In my computer screen, I have a finite number of pixels. And they're in these fixed locations, right? So eventually I'm gonna wanna turn on the pixel that is halfway between these rows. There is no such pixel. I have to pick this one or that one, which means that it can't be straight. There's no way for it to be straight, okay? By the way, I lied. There are also 45-degree lines, right? Those ones work, right? So vertical, horizontal, and diagonal. Those are the only, quote, real lines, right? All the other ones are somewhat straight, jaggy curves. Okay, all right. So somehow I'm going to have to decide which pixels to turn on, right? So this is where we use magic. Actually, magic is just math, right? So we're going to have to use things that are too advanced for the 10-year-olds that can actually program turtle graphics, right? Things like trigonometry. Okay. So yeah, you know, I can't explain to them how this is going to happen, right? They don't need to know. What do we call that? Abstraction. Okay. So here's what we would actually have to do. Using this direction, it turns out that the turtle needs to move 4 steps to the right for every 9 steps that is going up. Okay. Is that exact? No. All right. It's like 8.9 or something like that. It's close enough that I could have somewhat roundish numbers. Okay. So that's why I chose it. All right. But basically I need to go 4 and 9 up. Okay. Now I want you to think about this. If it was 4 and 8 up, okay, then what I would do is I would color like 2 vertically, right? This row and the row right above it, and then this row on the right above it, and then this row on the right above it, and it would work out. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not 4 and 8, which would just be 1 and 2, right? It's 4 and 9. So what I have to do is I move over by 1 pixel to the right, 2 pixels up most of the time. Every once in a while, 3 pixels up. Okay. And I have to do that in just the right way. Like I said, this is complicated. Okay. You know, I'm not trying to tell you this because it's so easy. Remember, my students would probably not be able to do this. Okay. Not because they're really bad students. No, no, no. They're great. This is that hard. Okay. Right. Okay. Like I said, this is tricky. It's actually been solved, obviously, because, you know, you've seen it working. The guy who figured it out was known as Bressenham. And the way to do this is known as Bressenham's line algorithm. Okay. And you can look it up. It's in Wikipedia. It's explained. It's very complicated. Okay. But in today's world, that algorithm is actually implemented in hardware in what we call the graphics card. Okay. So we actually tell the graphics card, hey, graphics card, draw a line between these 2 pixels. And it runs Bressenham's line algorithm. By the way, it runs Bressenham's line algorithm in parallel, okay, so that it can do that, right? I said in parallel only for this reason. If you or someone you know likes computer games, okay, then they really want to have a fast graphics card. And what we mean by that is that we can tell it to draw not just lines, but triangles, okay, really, really fast. And we give it these 3 coordinates and say, draw a triangle, right? We actually do that in 3-dimensional space, and we say, and go ahead and project that onto the screen. And we send thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of triangles and say, by the way, please do that 60 times per second. Good graphics card, good graphics card. And off it goes and does it. It's actually running Bressenham's line algorithm in parallel millions of times per second, okay? So that's happening, and your favorite gamer actually knows about things like frames per second, actually knows about things like triangles and polygons, and has never heard of Bressenham, okay? Oh, they do know about graphics cards. And there's the magic that makes it all happen, right? That's another word that we use for abstraction, okay? Because what are we saying? We have no clue how it works, but we know that it works. Okay, great. You know, somebody abstracted that away for you, okay? Now, most important part of this whole discussion, all of those details completely, totally hidden behind the forward abstraction, right? You say forward, and you have no clue that you just invoked trigonometry, right? And all sorts of fancy things to make that. Here's the next step. I don't want it jagged. I actually want it to look like a smooth line. Okay, so now we need shades of gray. And by how much does a hypothetical line actually go through your space, right? Well, if it goes through all of your space, then you're 100% on. If it only goes through half of it, then I'm going to make you 50% on. That's how we avoid the jaggies, and it looks smoother, right? Yeah, it gets even worse, okay? All abstracted. Okay, that's enough for now, okay? So that's kind of the, I don't know if you use that too, but my students know that when I say that, it means that a homework's coming up. So, so I have an exercise for you guys to do here. I'm actually happy if you discuss it with others, okay? If you're physically in the room, that's pretty easy to do, okay? If you are remote, there is a chat screen that you can use to talk to each other and discuss this, because I actually want, I mean, these are easy things that I'm asking, but I want as deep questions as you can, I mean, as deep answers as you can give me. And believe me, you know, if we could spend a whole year talking about this and going deeper and deeper and deeper, the guys who do that are in the philosophy department, right? And so, you know, they're like, what is the real meaning of the word this? They're arguing about abstractions, right? And, you know, when we talk about fear, what is that, right? Most of us just know, see a snake, run away. The philosophers will try to actually discuss what it really means, right? And they're just figuring out what the abstraction is. Okay, so here are the 2 things that I want you to do. And given the time, I think that we want to have probably a break, 15 minutes or so. And then when you come back from the break, do this activity, maybe 15, 20 minutes, okay? And then I want us to talk about it, okay? Because I really, that's how you'll get a real gut feel for abstraction around you, right? It's everywhere, right?
You might want to check the blog. People are putting up interesting
Yeah,
links.
okay, we shall do that. Okay, so I've written this down here, but just to be clear, I want you to think of different ways that you might implement the turtle graphics abstraction. Okay, what it might look like. And you may have some experience. Yeah, all right, logo. Oh, is that a new version?
I guess newly accessible.
Newly accessible, web-based logo, just what the world needed. So take any text-based language that you might be familiar with, you or your partner, right? Some examples of text-based languages: Python, Java, JavaScript. You know, there's lots laying around. Okay, so you might be familiar with something like that. They say, oh, okay, what would the turtle abstraction look like if I were to do it in JavaScript? Okay, I just want you to think about it, right? You know, think forward, left, and those kinds of things. That's the abstraction. How about a block-based language? And you've seen an example of that, Snap. Okay, so usually I have a hidden agenda behind every assignment that I give. I'm not going to hide it, right? I simply want you to be able to see how abstractions play out in code, right? So you can recognize them, right? And that's what's happening, okay? And then I want you to think of this. This is more open-ended. I want you to think of a mouse, okay? Not the little scurrying things, but the ones that we use to work with computers. I don't have one. Does anybody have a mouse? Yay, mice still live. We have, what's that? Oh, you got a super mouse? Oh. You got to bring it up so people can see it.
I know.
Yeah. Show them this thing.
Oh, you have to put yourself on camera.
How do I do that? Stop
Oh,
sharing?
here, I'll put it myself on camera.
Oh, good for you. Do I have to guide you to be able to share the
No,
screen?
here it is.
Okay.
So, and then it's got a little rolling thing here on top. Very cool. You want to say more about it? You should, it's yours. It isn't your grandma's
No, it's
mouse.
fine. I got it on Amazon. It was like $10 or $15. It wasn't very much. This is the
Right mouse or left mouse?
yeah. This is okay. This is the right click, or this one's the right click. This is left click. I know it whenever I'm using it, I can do pretty well with it, but I haven't used it for a while. But the only thing I didn't like is that the Bluetooth USB that goes with it, there's no way to store it inside the mouse.
Oh,
And I do wish it had that
little
feature.
dongle, yeah.
Yeah, I wish it had
Now,
that
when
feature.
you call that a mouse, can you actually use it on a surface or?
Yeah, I just used it on the tabletop.
That is so cool.
Can you use, so when you're using one of those right things and it's so hard with the regular mouse,
That's kind of why I got it.
does that turn out to be nice, smooth writing?
Yeah, I don't use it that much. I got it because I was thinking I could use it at home too. But I ended up I use my iPad. I just convert it so I can write right on my iPad at home. So I haven't used the writing thing with it very much. And I found I'm not a good artist anyway. So I was thinking, if you wanted to draw something that would work. But
not so much, yeah.
Yeah, works okay.
All right, well, that was show and tell. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we have that. I don't quite know what to call that thing, but it's definitely a cool device. We have joysticks, okay, trackpads, and like I said, this is open-ended. There's lots of these things. I want you to consider all of these and kind of think of them as instances. Instance is another technical word I'm just sneaking in when I talk about abstraction. These are all instances of some greater abstraction, right? And what I want you to do is to think about that greater abstraction. What would you call it, right? I'm going to suggest that mouse is not a very good name because mouse is a specific one, right? So this is something bigger than that, okay? And I want you to think about any other instances of that abstraction. I came up with 3. Already we have a 4th, and I'm sure we can come up with all sorts of others, right? That we may have had experience with. So that's what I want you to think about. First, a break. Do that in teams, and then we'll get back together and compare notes.
So the break goes until what? It's 9:10 almost now.
No, 9:03 actually.
I'm sorry, 5 minutes. Yes, 9:03.
Right.
9:15?
So let's say, yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, I'll put a timer the rest of you can hear.
Perfect. All right, my son still can't drive, so I'm going to bring him.
Okay.
So I'm Tisha.
Yes, hi. Hi. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
You look really good. What happened to you?
Well, you know, I was perfectly fine. Really, I was like for an accident.
Thank you.
It was just kind of like, and then just, you know, sitting around a ride and stuff like that.
Well, but still, I went with lots of other people. I mean, I hit a deer, but it was back on, you know, Medicine Bow. You know, there weren't too many people. So that was a blessing and not a blessing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's wonderful.
that's me. I'm hiking up the hill and I was just so, you know, jumbled. I was like, do you have a cell phone? She goes, no, but I have a landline. I'm like, yes, I'm like,
Even better.
yeah. So luckily I was right by her house and she had, you know, communication. But I was just, by the time I got it all settled, it was like 10:30.
Yeah. Oh, no,
I'm just
no,
going
no.
all day.
So that I said, what happened to you? And that you be here tomorrow.
Yeah, luckily my husband's like, "Oh, I said, yeah.
Because it gets virtual.
Yeah. So really, I was fine. It was just at first. And, yeah. So anyway, here
Well,
I am. And then I
Again,
can
yes.
get caught up on my work.
oh, yes.
Because I
And
didn't do it.
Dan has that blank sheet. No, blank. 5 minutes.
Oh, yesterday. I think that's the way I searched it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you don't need a big.
Yeah, it's only Monday through Thursday. So you're fine to go and play with your cabinet.
Okay, so you've been following the blog? I've been blogging.
No.
Okay, so, you know, yesterday we left everybody alone for a long time. So I've been doing this over here.
I realized you have been doing something on your blog.
No, this is the class blog, our class chat.
No, this I understand, but did you do something on the blog, like the same blog that you were using last year, or no?
No, I didn't do
You
anything
didn't.
more than
Oh, okay. So what do you mean then? This is the chat
this.
in Zoom, right?
Mhm,
Okay.
yes.
And so what do you mean? What did you do with that?
Well, for example, I've just been having a little conversation with people. People have been sending me emails, and
Mhm.
then the first one up here, you know, I responded to somebody here, actually asked about chapter 1 of the readings. Okay, fine. And then Ruben made his comments, so I brought in a,
Okay.
you know, a
But those
picture
are-
of a turtle walking backwards, just so that they have something else to think about. And then,
So you put links in the chat.
Yeah.
In the chat.
and then some. That's when Carla
No.
brought the turtle online turtle logo. And then here's somebody who noticed that there's a Google computational thinking course.
That's good. Nice. That's just something that I'm.
Now, I don't
Okay,
know,
so-
you know, they may be chatting to each other as well.
Yeah, but this chat, is it going to come up in the
If
recording?
he's recording, yes.
Okay,
it'll come
it
up.
should. It should.
So that's one of the things I often do,
Mhm.
because if I'm giving the class, I don't often catch what's going on over here. So then if I record it, I can go back and look
Oh
and see
yeah,
if I missed
yeah.
anything.
Recording is very important. So hopefully today it works.
Yes, hopefully he is recording today. Yeah, so, you know, this way they can contribute and they can say things. And,
Yeah.
you know, when I've been an offline student, oftentimes at least a couple of these people will be texting on their phones.
Mhm, mhm. Can that go? Can this thing connect to? I mean, it can. You can run it on an Android phone or iPhone. I think there's no problem with that.
Right.
But suppose that you don't have Zoom installed, could you possibly, you probably
Oh,
can
but you don't
text
really
it
have
to
Zoom
chat.
installed. I mean, when you log in, it downloads something. And every time you log in,
No, on my iPad, I
Oh,
have
you're-
a Zoom
okay.
icon. And I think I installed it on my Mac.
oh, okay. Well, I
You
don't,
can, so.
okay.
So you
But I
can
have
then,
never
you
done
can
that.
click on Zoom and,
Okay, install.
oh, by the way, Alina, we installed Word and this kind of programs on your
I'm sorry, what?
we installed Word on your Mac. Do they at IT do that?
No, I've gone online and downloaded it from
For-
IT.
From IT? Oh. I didn't know that.
So there's a place where they have software that's either free to you or almost free to you as a faculty member or as a student. So I go
Okay,
there and,
I can call them to figure out what it is.
yeah. Or you
Okay.
can go to the IT website and search for software.
Okay, I didn't know that. I thought I have to bring my own computer to them, but if I can install it, it's fine. Yeah, because
And-
Word I will need. I don't know how to use the Apple software like Pages and Numbers.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it's easy, but
It isn't
but
so
it's
bad.
not. It's
Right.
not compatible with everything else.
Business. Well, this is what happened from. And I've also been
Yeah, that's.
monitoring the email.
But not this newest comes from the view. I'm kind
No.
of concerned about that. And
Yeah, I haven't
the
gotten all
reason
the
I'm
way back.
concerned is that both her and Rachel, so there are two people who are
Mhm.
taking care of them, they are both being transferred to the registers. Both, not all.
And they
So
don't really know who's replacing them, right?
nobody's replacing them so far. Nobody has any idea. So, in this kind of context, you just probably just don't have the time to do anything. Anyway, if you have a chance, if between discuss and the other one, give her a call. I'm going to
will.
call her in the afternoon too.
Okay.
Try to get hold of her. And then if nothing happens tomorrow, I'll go again. They're just students. They don't know anything. They give me these forms. They're not even sure that's the form. So
Well, it is a form, but
it is a
that-
form because you're seeing it.
that could work for us. I remember when
As long as people get into the system.
Yeah.
Right? Reimbursements and this kind of things, we'll take care of them through Lori, right?
Right.
I think.
Right.
Oh, by the way, we have to take care of ours. Do you want me to email her about it? Did you talk to her already?
I haven't talked to Lori. I did email Vicky a long time ago. She asked us
Oh.
about it.
Yeah, no, we have to talk to Lori.
Okay.
Because she told me that she's going to do that only the class begins, which is fine.
Right.
Absolutely
That's
fine.
the rule.
And but she didn't know, so we have to pick a time frame. So it's going to be 1 month. What do you? I think we should pick it for June.
I
Is
don't
that
know.
okay?
I think it's too late to pick for June. Can they pay us for June?
If they can, is it okay
Sure.
if I
Sure.
arrange for you also?
Yeah.
And if not, it will be July. But I
Yeah.
think I'm nice. I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure that the retroactive works well. We're not going to get a payment in June. We're going to get a payment in July,
July,
but
right.
it's going to appear like June. So I think
That's the only
that's the correct.
downside, right? Yes. Okay.
Press the arrow key and then make it. So what does she do? She goes to the first call. I know. How did you make me go to school? To actually see it move, it's twice as big if you use 10, and like the compass has 10 pixels. The other one's like, oh, you know, whereas if my sprite's this big and moves 10, it looks like you're actually making that move. And that's structure and stuff. There's actually this right around. So I was one of those as the entire model conditions. And believe it or not, talk to her about that coordinate plane 1, 2, 3, 4. They'll never get that done. It looks like that math. But they're going to be, why is this negative? Here's your cross, here's your center. If it's in this quadrant, your x and y is this plus or minus, this, you know. And so I handed them that so we can see what value is what. Here, I have a negative y and a negative x. But when I come here, I have a positive y. And so that's how it works out. Which numbers are going to be if you're trying to have this by this side of this side. What are my x, y? And so yeah, created that cheat sheet. Not because I have any desire to become a quadrant. If you listen there just so that it's exposure, not like what quadrant it's really, but so that when I get in the they're like, oh wait, I have that other frame of reference. Not because I really would ever ask them what quadrant anything was in, because I can do that. But sometimes I feel like when I give them more information, they can store it and they'll pull it out later. Because I have and she's like, oh, so they're and I think it will find the program and we'll look at it together. And so I found it online and we did it first simulator and see, you know, this is supposed to be a robot ride and chips.
Here's another thing that we have already covered.
What's that? Yes.
I just realized because I talked to Sarah on the hallway. So she slept in a friend's pop-up. And the reason is that they were concerned about the rates at the hotel. And so I don't know, we should take better care. I'm going to check with Lori if there is anything that we can do to arrange for.
Yeah. Are you going to do it now?
I will send her an email right now.
Okay.
What do you think, Lola?
I think it's a good idea.
I think, you know, maybe she knows something
or can figure out who's now in charge of that stuff.
Yeah. Because I don't know why you didn't get any answer from those housing people.
Well, why did I get answers from Debbie? I'm thinking that there maybe not even housing
From
people
everywhere.
anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm good, how are you? That would be perfect. I could do that. Roseville Street, did you say? Always. Oh, yes. I do.
Well, actually, she got transferred into.
So if anybody else is having trouble, you know, if you have 2 or 3 different emails, one is forwarding or something, or if you just like to add 2 emails into our distribution list, email it to me and I'll add whatever other email address you'd like to have. So you got one of those extra emails here, you know? And if you, so George is gonna be online as of what, tomorrow? So I was just making sure that he knew where the chat is, because it's where I'm trying to keep up with people who are, you know, off.
Yeah, I've been getting the emails, but I don't know where the chat is.
Go to the Zoom class.
I don't have that.
You're just listening to, you know,
No, yesterday was presented. Okay. So where is that? So we should do something in the online class as well. Because this is the one of the other teachers. And I got that. So, but I did send it again. Because I didn't get one that said this.
All right, so they're not even logged into Zoom. And they were watching here yesterday, so they're a little. And then send the link out again. And I know that to some of the people at the distance, I'll just send it out every time we, you know, send. And they don't know where the chat is. And so George, for example, tomorrow he's going to New Orleans and he'll be off for us. So I showed him where this is.
Good.
But if he logs in late, he only sees the chat from the time he logs in. Now I could. Now you're recording this.
I believe I'm recording.
All right. Well, when you record, you get the whole chat from the beginning. I was thinking. What do you think?
I think there's a way for me to save the chat. So we'll do that.
That may.
Lynn, I've been saving the chat. Lynn,
No. Well, we have wired courses available for everyone, so we can actually upload it. It needs to be uploaded to some website. That is checked.
Right.
I'm guessing it'll be a
Well, actually.
Oh, you're talking about the recordings? Oh, it works better than that. They will send you a link saying your recording is available, and I just have a page where I put the links to that recording.
At the end of the session? When you go.
Almost at the end, yeah. It takes a few minutes.
But we do have access to our facilities.
I know, but they will as soon as they register.
Yeah, I
So
don't know
when
when
that
that's going
happens,
to happen.
they'll be able to
I
get
don't know when
it.
that's going
If it's just a link, then it'll be,
It is just,
then we can just mail this.
Okay, I shared, I added you to that.
I saw that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I was just doing it because I thought, well, we need, you know.
Yes, no, it's a very good idea. Okay, so we've got a note page that's been added, and she's the author, so now 3 of us are on the note page.
Good.
We're gonna send the link every morning. And I've just been trying to involve them
Yeah.
this way because we forgot about, well, must have felt like we forgot about them.
Right. So how much time do we have to give them for this?
I don't wear a watch anymore. What time is it? It's 9:40. It's 9:40. So you've got almost 2 hours left.
Oh yeah, yeah. I got a lot of stuff to do.
Okay.
But,
So here, let me just show you some of the other things that we've got added here. All right. So I've been asking or answering emails and things like that of people. And here's the badass turtle.
Yeah, I saw that. That was
Okay.
pretty awesome. Going backwards.
All right. So then here, this was that online, web-based logo.
Right.
And then there's a course.
Excellent.
And then here's Carla saying that this is, we're keeping the notes, and there's the link.
Mute
But,
and stop it.
very good.
It's under more. So.
Okay. And let's see what else is there. And I said, well, let's add this and that to our notes.
Okay.
And you can see what the notes are looking like right now. So I think people are busily adding.
Good, good, good. That's excellent.
And what else do we have here? And I'm going to make sure that they get on. And so I took them to Codeorg, and I said, they always have these current events. Do you know that there were 285 or 84 computer science jobs opening in Wyoming, and you have 25 graduates? Now in Colorado,
Did not know that.
It's worse. There are
Really?
13,000 jobs, and they have 780 graduates. Okay, so here's a link to the Joint Education Committee meeting today and tomorrow on computer science. Did you know that? Look at that.
Yeah, I know. They asked me to take part in that. That was actually one of the reasons I left early yesterday, because I had to meet with their staff.
How did that go?
Very well. Yeah. They really just wanted to know what we were doing in here, as well as in the computer science department.
I just discovered that saving chat dumps the same file name everywhere. Apparently, I've not really been saving anything. Okay. So here's somebody who saved it yesterday, and she's saving today's. Thank you for the notes.
Good, good.
Okay, so now Carla's advanced. She's going to save the daily chats with everyone.
Good, good, good.
Okay, so awesome. Now you just.
So you think maybe 5 more minutes and we should have all the abstractions that they can come up with?
Yes, I think so. All right, so then there's this, and what else? Oh, what was the Zoom link? Okay, so if you haven't been on Zoom, I just sent the link again, and there's been a lot of activity with people here and people off site, and they started making a notes page, and they're also recording the chats that are going on if you haven't followed them. So we've got yesterday's chat, and you'll have today's full chat as well, and you're posting those on that same note page, right? I just sent an email to you today.
I had to go and click send receive on my.
What?
I had to go click send receive on my email to make it come out.
Wayne, I'll forward it to the email I have for you. Okay, just went, Dwayne. Anybody else not get the email I just sent with links and things? Okay, so that list of participants. All right, so can I edit this or only you?
No, you can edit it. Just hit edit somewhere. There should be a link there.
Here, I'll make it bigger.
Yeah, make it really big. There you go. Go to the top. Edit.
Okay.
Okay, where is my stop video?
Okay, so all I'm doing is
There
either
we go.
changing or
Much
adding a
better.
new email for.
I don't need to see myself. That's like not a necessity.
And
Oh, there's where the turtle is. Okay. And here's where the chat is.
an email for Brian. Jim Hoffman's new person is in the class.
Mhm.
And so I'll get his email here. You need more on the list, right, besides the email?
That is
Participants
everything.
list.
Oh, I haven't put them in there.
Comments.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll put him in there and I'll make the comment.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna look at you. Because I just.
We're going past that. You said you were gonna take a break.
Computer audio. Because then you can mute it. Where to go? Oh, here. See, he should put those up on there. I've got stuff on mute. You should have put the slides up on there.
Yeah. I don't know why this isn't on today.
I thought it was.
What's that box that you're looking at? Is that the chat?
That is, but this is a chat between me and Jim Hoffman. I'm not sure where the chat is. This is a private chat. He's no, I'm using well, I say colleague, they're all my colleagues. He's a colleague at the Basin, and he introduced me to do something, and I said, well, when do we hear back about this?
I'm not trying to eavesdrop. I just thought maybe I was missing something here.
Oh no, you're not. You're fine. Look, it's not really anything.
What I want to do is
Hit those
start
upper
with the
right
first
three dots and
exercise.
give it a
No, wait,
choice.
I want to start with the second exercise and talk about this greater abstraction. So first I want to give our folks that are
How come
remote
you
kind
go
of a
down on
chance to
his
pipe in
page
the
there,
chat
abstractions and programming?
and maybe tell us what we could call this abstraction. Any ideas for the
Yeah,
name?
why isn't he putting this up and moving it so we can see it?
Okay, how about people here? Anybody has a name for this abstraction?
We're making
Huh? Yeah, you know, mouse, trackpad, joystick in general. What are these? Okay. So our first suggestion is actually input device, right? And input device is pretty good. Is it? I'm not sure that is quite what I have in mind, because, for example, a keyboard is an input device, right? And that seems different.
It's like a filter kind of.
Still wish I could move the screen so I could see what's going on. It's what he's doing.
Like an up and down mouse.
We're trying to define what an abstraction is.
So like the lead controller, right? In a video game controller.
So this is the part where it gets tricky, right? So what exactly do we do with abstraction? I'm trying to get closer to the mic here. And yeah, it's hard. In this particular case, it ends up being almost one of categorization, right? Or the word we were using earlier, generalization, right? What does a mouse have in common with a trackpad, have in common with a joystick, right? Or with a fancy device that we did a show and tell with that I don't quite have a name for, okay? What is it that they have in common? And an input device is a really good abstraction in its own right? But if I'm thinking in terms of input device to a computer, mouse will come to mind. Another one that will come to mind immediately is keyboard, right? Pretty soon, we're not there yet, right? But maybe in 10 years, when we think of input device, the first thing that'll come to our mind is Amazon Echo, right? And that's how we communicate with computers. We talk to them, right? So it seems overly broad, right? Am I right? Who knows? Okay, that's the whole point of abstractions is we can discuss them. And as programmers, right, we'll actually spend a lot of time doing that. Is, what are the right classes that we want to define? What are the right functions, methods that we want to define? And what we're doing is we're arguing about what abstractions do we want in our code. Okay, so that's what I expect, right? So anyway, the question is still, do we have some subcategory of input device that would capture these and not capture keyboard or echo? It's hard naming abstractions. It's a lot harder than it looks. Okay. Actually, the questions are in that's what's showing in my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But they wanted a link.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
So any suggestions? Remote folks, any suggestions for what we can name mouse, joystick, trackpad, and so on? There's definitely a kind of input device, right? But maybe we want to differentiate those from keyboard and Amazon Echo or whatever else there is out there. There might be one.
It's the thing that we're manipulating.
Okay, they're more manipulating. Okay. So we have a suggestion. That we can go by the fact that they're manipulating. Okay. So that's different than definitely Amazon Echo, right? So we're making some distinctions. That might still, you could argue that a keyboard would still fall in that category. I don't know, right? In the sense that you certainly use your hands to do it, although you don't shape it. So I don't know. That would be a thing. I'm seeing an idea such that interface, right? That is definitely too broad, right? Interface is an even higher generalization than input device, right? Handheld is pretty good, right? It's kind of like a handheld input device. I wouldn't just want to call it handheld because then that, my Coke can is handheld. So anyway, a tactile input device, and again, that goes along with manipulative, right? So, we're all in those. So yeah, those actually, by the way, are great abstractions, okay? I'm going to share with you kind of what I would have used, right? And I would have called it a pointing device, okay? And the reason I would call it a pointing device is because I'm thinking of function, right? It lets me select a place on the screen, right? That's really what it does, right? And so, when I move my mouse, there's actually a cursor that moves along with it, and I can say, that's what I'm pointing at, right? And then, of course, it's got a button that lets me say, point at it now, right? I really mean it, do something, okay? So I might get away with that, okay? The very first pointing device was a light pen. And that was a very expensive piece of equipment that you could actually put on the screen and eventually draw with, okay? That was actually done by Evans and Sutherland, some two pioneers in computing. And the way that it worked, the way that a screen used to work, that's not the way that this screen works, right? None of the ones that I see in this room. But the way that the old screens used to work, there were CRTs. There was actually an electron beam that was shot from the back of the screen, and it would illuminate a little region that has phosphor. And so then if you hit it with the electrons, then it would light up, okay? So what would happen is that the electron beam would start at the top left corner and go all the way to the right, top right, and then come down and come down, right? Right? Those are called scan lines, and we still use those words today, right? That is a scan line. And so even though you would see a screen, that's the way you would think of the screen, in reality, it was a pixel at a time that was illuminated, right? Our eyes couldn't tell the difference, okay? So there again, you're seeing abstraction at play, right? Between the way that you think of the computer screen and what it's actually doing. And what the light pen would do is it would detect when electrons hit it, and then it would send a signal through a wire back to the computer. So the computer would know what pixel you were pointing at, because if you put the pen to the screen, it would get the electrons and it would go, oh, yes, I'm the selected pixel, okay? That was the first such device. Sutherland then went on and built something different, which today we call a mouse, okay? So that's where that came from. So anyway, so that's an abstraction. Can you think of any other devices that would fit this pointing abstraction? I mean, I know you came up with one.
Well, the Apple Pencil.
Okay, so the Apple Pencil, right? That's kind of almost direct, counterpart of the original light pen, actually. Yeah. Others?
All right, we've got smart pen, touchscreen.
A touchscreen, right? This is my pointing device, right? It's a finger, and I use it to say, this is what I'm pointing at. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's the ultimate in user interfaces, right? What about what? Oh, the Wii board. Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and it's got that little thing, that wand that you can use to point, right? So yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we have all sorts of different and unique ways to point. Go ahead.
Headsets for virtual reality.
Headset for virtual reality, right? I'm looking that way, right? Some really fancy fighter jets have actual sensors that track where you're looking at, and they use that for targeting. I want a bomb right there, okay? So that's kind of an interesting mouse, right? But basically, what is it? It's a mouse, right? Now, I mentioned on the first day, yesterday, that AP Computer Science Principles is meant to be inclusive, right? And inclusive of, I guess I want to phrase it as mathematical maturity, right? Are you doing calculus? Are you doing algebra? It's okay, right? This is inclusive, right? But it's also inclusive of gender and race and culture and all sorts of different things. It's intended to be, okay? And we try very hard. So in that context, I want to mention kind of pointing devices for people who have limited mobility, right? And all of those are essentially mice, right? But maybe you use your tongue to be able to run it. Maybe you use your eye, to be able to click, right? All sorts of different ways of interacting that when you come down to it, it's like, oh, that's a keyboard. Oh, that's really a mouse, right? But actually, they have very different ways of interacting because the user has different ways of interacting, right? So that's something that you want to keep an eye out for, right? So that's also possible. Oh, reader pens, absolutely. Checking to see what else there is here. Whiteboards, right? Smart boards that let you interact with content. Very, very true. Okay. All right. So I think that's enough of that particular example. I want to talk about how you might implement the turtle abstraction in a text-based language like Java or Python or something like that. Anybody have something they want to share on that, whether right here or on the screen? Go ahead.
That to me just seems like it would take so much because you have to physically think about your location. You have to physically think about where you want to move. Just the coding from point A to point B is going to be so many lines of code. Then am I turning that pixel on is another line of code? Am I assigning it a color? Am I assigning it a shade? I mean, I'm really glad they put that in graphic cards, let me tell you, because when I think about just even moving 5 pixels and lighting them up, especially if you want to make the line wide enough that you don't have those sharp edges, so you have that nice blur.
Right.
I'm thinking that's 40 lines of code with no problem.
Easily. So one of the responses that I have here, and I want to make sure that folks that are not here can hear it, is doing this in a text-based language would be really, really hard because you have to keep track of a lot of things: position, direction, pen color, and like we talked about earlier, before the break, just implementing the forward instruction is really, really difficult. Okay, so that is absolutely true. Okay, and like I said, implementing that in a text-based language would be very hard. I forget text-based, implementing that period is extremely hard. Okay, now I realized that's what I asked for. Okay, and unfortunately that's not what I meant. So let me rephrase what I actually wanted you to think about, which is a lot easier. Okay, I want to quote implement the abstraction. So show the abstraction in a text-based language. Right? The whole point of abstracting is that we hide all those details, right? So I don't want us to put on our hat of programmers because, as I stated, my students would have a very hard time actually fully implementing this abstraction if they had to write the code for it, right? But they would have no problems. I mean, absolutely would not be challenged at all to program using this abstraction, right, in a text-based language. So maybe implementing was the wrong word. Maybe I should have said representing. Okay, maybe that would have helped. Okay, so how would we actually make this abstraction available to programmers, whether they are college students or 4th graders, right, in say a text-based language?
How about the keys that make things go up, down, right, left? What is
Okay.
it? JK or something?
Right. And at least the kids who are gamers are very, very clear with those abstractions, WASD or HJKL or, the arrow keys. And they'll just do those subconsciously because they've used those in games. Okay. So yeah, that's definitely one way of doing it. Okay. Okay, let me bring something up on the screen here just so we can see it. So this is just my editor, and I'm gonna swap to the language if I have it. Yep, Java. Let's just do Java. Okay, so this is what the turtle abstraction might look in a textual language like Java. Java is painful, okay, because it is extremely verbose. Okay, so let's try public class turtle. Okay, and I'm not actually, even better. I'm going to call it an interface. If you don't know the difference between interface and class, do not worry. I don't care about that, okay? I just want to show you what this might look like. So I might have something like, oh, good Lord, it's Java. So public, void, okay? There's a lot of typing that's going to happen here. Move, let's see, forward, int, end steps, okay? So right here, I am writing like a geek, all right? End steps instead of number of steps because habit, okay? Back in the old days, you only had 8 characters for variables. So you got really good at compressing. One might call that abstracting, right? Int is integer because adding the EGER would be too painful, okay? Now, we're also very good at copying and pasting. So forward, we also have backward, okay? And we might have public void left int degrees, okay? I'm making those integer. Maybe I could make them floating, which really means real. Okay, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. And right, and just to have everything, public void pen down.
And pin up.
And pen up.
Pin over.
Okay, so.
Can I add?
Sure.
You know, for those of you who haven't looked at commands of this sort, you might think of on a graphing calculator, the TIs, you can go in and get the syntax if the command requires more input, right? So if you're going to take a logarithm and you want a different base, then you can put 2 pieces of input, and you maybe go to the catalog to see what the order and the possibilities are.
All right. So so now I'm going to, actually now I need a class. Public void static main, okay? These are the kinds of things that when you do a lot of text-based programming, your fingers just type and you don't even have to think, okay? And so now I'll use this abstraction. This is the part that I wanted to get to. Everything else is just to get to this. So turtle T1, that is the name of it, is a new turtle. And I can now say T1 dot forward 100, T1 dot left 90. Nice 90, huh? Okay. And let's do that 4 times. And voila, we have a square, okay? So, so that's how you would use this in a text-based language, okay? Now, in a block-based language, right? That's what you saw yesterday, okay? So I could, for example, bring up snap here. And let's try. I think I said forward first, so that is move, okay? And I said 100. And then we were turning left. That's right, okay, I want the other one. Okay, and we said 90, I think. And then I want to duplicate that. Remember, I did that when I was using my editor, you know, copied and pasted because, well, I don't want to have to type that much. There it is. This is the exact same thing as this right here, okay? The only difference between those 2 bits of code is that you have semicolons. You have to say T1 dot, otherwise nothing works. You have to put the hundreds and 90s inside parentheses, otherwise nothing works, okay? As a professional computer scientist, I can tell you that all that stuff is important, okay? It's how we communicate with computers. I can also tell you that all of that stuff is incredibly frustrating, especially when you're beginning, right? And one of the things that's very painful is you misspell forward, and then you get a very strange error message, right? You know, and you forget a semicolon, and then you get a very strange error message. And I was actually grading, or reading is the word we use at the AP, right? Some of the student responses for programs. And one of the questions is, tell us about a difficulty you found and how you solved it. And this student actually wrote down, I couldn't get this to work. And I kept thinking that I needed semicolons or braces to fix it. And then I talked to my partner who said that we needed commas. That was the difficulty, and that was the solution. Absolutely no abstraction took place, right? They're thinking of the program as a sequence of characters, and they have to put in the right magic character to make things work. That is painful, right? And at a certain age, and I don't mean, I'm talking about age in terms of generations, not how old the students are. But at a certain age, that's all we had, right? And so I learned how to program that way. And I think that is a good way to shut certain people out of the programming path, right? Go ahead.
That's my kind of trouble with like Arduino and stuff, is because it is really this text-based programming language, and all of my kids program in blocks.
Yeah.
You know, and so I I mean, they can tell me what they wanted to do. They can tell me these things, but then I'm going, well, let's go steal the code somewhere. And they go, okay, well, I want to change this number. Like, they know where the variables are when they've got the code sitting in front of them. But to have them try and type out all the semicolons or brackets is just painful.
Exactly. So we're having feedback on poor students fighting syntax when they're using Blockly for, I forget, did you say Arduinos or?
She said Arduino.
Yeah, we're using Arduinos. And so
Yeah.
They're trying to transfer their block
Base to that.
knowledge into the text-based
Exactly.
knowledge, and it's a definite.
It's a definite split. I mean, when you actually have to deal with syntax talking to a computer, right? Then you're actually asking the students to make it easy for the computer to communicate, right? That's what the semicolons are there for. We humans don't need them, okay? If you took those semicolons out, I'd be able to read that bit of code just as easily as if the semicolons are in. It is easier for the computer if the semicolons are in. That's why we put them there, right? So we're asking the students to think like computers instead of asking the computers to meet the student at least halfway, maybe even a little closer to the student, right? So now, computing principles, okay? Let's say that they're using this drag and drop kind of stuff, right? Are they actually learning computing, right? And I'm asking you guys, but I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here. Where we run into more trouble is when I'm talking, for example, to fellow university faculty members, because there's a tendency to respond, oh, you're using a block language? That's not real programming, right? And next they might say something like, oh, I went online and I looked for the top 10 programming languages to get a job, and not a single one of those is block-based, right? Absolutely true, right? Because these are languages that are meant to meet the programmer, as opposed to meet the computer, right? If you're a professional programmer, you're paid the big bucks, go ahead and meet the computer where he wants to be, okay? In Python, which is my favorite language, a tab is different than a space, right? So if you put in a tab and it indents 8 spaces, and then on the next line, you just type 8 spaces, you have a syntax error, right? If you actually look at your computer screen, you go, there's no error, that's just perfectly fine. And then an expert comes along and says, oh, erase this 8 spaces, put a tab. It looks the same way. Now your program works, okay? If you're a professional, you just chuck that up to, well, this is the profession I chose, okay? If you're learning this, you go, I want to have nothing to do with it. If you're normal, right? If you're not normal, then you become a computer scientist, and then you go, this is the profession I chose, so it's okay, right? But that's really asking a lot for kids. And I think that's one of the things that closes the door to some of them. Maybe not all of them, right? But definitely to some of them, right? So that's why I preach the gospel of block-based languages, right? For somebody who's just starting out, this is nicer. And if you look at this, right, the difference between the block and the text, I hope that you can believe that it's pretty much the same thing, right? It's pretty much the commands, and so they're actually going to learn the concepts of programming. And later, further down the road, if they want to become computer scientists, then by all means do that. And you'll actually swap at some point to text-based languages. But then you'll be struggling with, where do the semicolons go? And you will not be struggling with, how do I program things to make it draw a square, right? You already know how to do that, right? So it's fight one battle at a time, as opposed to computers are hard, go for it, right? That would be a horrible way to learn, and that's what we normally do to people, right? And so I don't think it's a surprise that we don't appeal to a wide segment of the students. Okay. Now I want to be fair. Okay, so let me do something else. That's a nice turtle. I want turtle T2. That's just another turtle. So now I have 2 turtles in my thing, and I want this one to go forward by 50 and left by 60. And you know what? I'm gonna put this in a loop for int I equals 1 while I is less than 60. So what do I need? if I turn 6 times.
So are you typing in Python right now?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you in Java or Python?
This is actually Java, okay? It doesn't matter if I did Python, it would look almost the same way, except there wouldn't be braces and semicolons. There would just be tabs and spaces. Go ahead.
Do you have to say this for Q2?
Oh, thank you. That's another thing that I want you all to learn. Programming is hard, right? And one of the reasons that it's hard is because you need to do 2 things at the same time. One is you need to think of the abstraction that you're working with, you know, the algorithm, and then you need to think of the details of what you're typing, right? And that's hard. You know, that's the reason we have typos in term papers, right? You know, it's like, I know that you never say, well, the you know, subject, but you type that way, right? Why is that? That wasn't, you know, yeah, we do that all the time. Yeah. So, you know, as humans, we can see that repeated these and go, I know what you were trying to say, I'm okay. Computers will give you a bizarre syntax error and say, hey, you didn't do it exact, so tough luck, okay? So that's what makes it difficult. Okay, so notice that this is very, very, very kind of different code. Now it doesn't look like a block-based language, okay? But I want to show you that that actually that's not true. And it is true in some block-based languages. I won't mention any names, but at least in Snap it isn't. So first thing I want you to see is this guy right here. Create a clone of myself. All right. Create a clone means make another copy of. Right. Compare that to this. Turtle T2 is equal to new turtle. That is, create a clone of turtle. Okay. Make another sprite that knows everything that the turtle knows. That's how you do it in the block-based languages. Okay. By the way, it's a different abstraction. Okay. It's something that uses prototypes. I've created a beautiful sprite, right? And now I want to make one that's just like it, right? What that lets you do, I'm talking to humans in the room, right? And remotely. What that lets you as humans do is to not be conscious of the fact that when you were writing instructions using those blocks, you were creating an abstraction for your sprite. You're thinking that the sprite is the whole thing, right? And then later you go, wouldn't it be nice to have more than one geometric figure on the screen? Drawing at the same time? Ah, I need 2 sprites. Oh, but you know, I didn't write a class. Class is the Java abstraction mechanism. I have classes and instances, and I create instances using new, right? But a class can't draw, right? A class is the abstraction of things that can draw, okay? So you need to create the class first. That's the abstraction first, and then you create the instances that can do the things, right? Again, that's a real high, you know, highfalutin computing concept that you're trying to get beginners to learn on the first day, right? That's before they can even start writing a program, right? That's tough. That's really tough. The way that they sneak that into this text-based languages is you simply write an instance that can do things, and then you say, oh, if I only thought ahead, I wish I had 2 instances. No problems, clone it. I wish I had 3 instances. Clone it again, right? And but it's the same idea, right? I want to create something else, a new thing that has these properties. Okay, so I can create a clone, and then I can actually put some code like when I start as a clone, I can repeat 6 times. Sorry, I forgot the program that I wrote. First forward by 50. Nope, not all my files. I wanted to get my code back in Java. Okay, so right here I have create a clone of myself. Then I have this thing that says when I start as a clone, what's happening there? Well, somebody just created a clone. That was actually T1. That was the original instance that knows how to do things, right? And then it says when I start as a clone, T1 did not start as a clone. T1 was already running. T2 started as a clone, okay? And so it's T2 that's going to run this little block. And what is this block? Repeat 6 times. That is a nicer way of saying for int I equals 1 while I, oh, I'm sorry. I told you programming is hard. For int I equals 0 while I is less than 6, I plus plus. That is the computer geek way of saying repeat 6 times, okay? And what do I want you to repeat 6 times? Forward 50, left 60, okay? It is the same code. If you abstract away, get rid of the differences, right? This is blocks, this is text, right? Get rid of those differences and just look at it and you go, it's doing the same thing, right? So that's just something that I want to pass on to you. And I want to suggest, right, you know, that for beginners, an AP Computer Science Principles is actually a beginning programming course, right? This tech stuff actually works really well, right? And I know that some higher ed people, including myself, right, will sometimes argue back and say, well, that's not real programming, that's drag and drop, right? I've gotten past it because I've done enough code with Snap to realize, never mind, there's not a single assignment that I would get freshmen that I can't do in Snap, okay? And that was a powerful realization. It's like, oh, this is a programming language, right? I'm not dragging and dropping, I'm programming, right? And so that's great. You know, let them do that, and then we can transition them. It'll be a lot easier to transition them to the detail-oriented once they see the big picture, right? And what's nice is that I sometimes have to tell students, you know, gosh, I thought computing was going to be fun, but I just hate all this stuff. Tell them, well, I'm sorry, that's stuff that you have to learn before you get to the fun part. So hang in there. I promise you that there's going to be some really fun stuff coming. They drop. They leave. They're like, I'm going to do something else, right? And it's all because they got tired of looking for semicolons. Okay, so we don't have to do that. All right. Let me talk about abstractions in programming. Okay, how do we actually do these things? One thing you need to learn is that different languages have very different mechanisms for abstraction. I showed you one tiny example of that. You know, in Java, you say new turtle to create a turtle. In Snap, to create a new sprite, you say make a clone, right? So, you know, it's a different way of thinking, but it's the same idea behind it, okay? But because different languages offer different mechanisms, I really want you to be careful and choose the language that you use when you're teaching carefully, okay? Because abstractions is really the heart of what computing is all about, right? And if we choose a language that doesn't let you make abstractions consciously, right? Notice that with the block-based language, you're working with the turtle, there's an abstraction there, right? But the student isn't making it. The student isn't consciously abstracting, right? They're actually just joining together forward and turn lefts to create geometric shapes, right? There's, you know, so they're not consciously abstracting, then they're not learning about abstraction, which is a fundamental idea in computing, right? So we're not helping them, okay? If you actually teach advanced placement computer science principles, and I hope many of you will, okay? Then you got to think about your students and how they're going to be graded, right, by the AP readers. And so here's something that you all can relate to, I'm sure. The easier you make it for the reader to grade your homework, the more likely it is that you're going to get a high grade, right? So if the answer is there, but you're going to have to hunt for it for a long time before you can see it, it may get missed, okay? Now, some perspective that I'm sure the students won't get, but you will, is that this year, 46,000 students took the exam. There were about 300 readers over a period of about 5 days, right? When you add all that up, you end up with, oh, there's 2 responses also per exam, okay? So multiply the 46,000 by 2. Basically, it ended up being somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes per response, okay? That's the rate at which you have to read. Otherwise, you cannot finish reading in time, right? So, and there might be 4 to 7 questions per response, depending on create versus explore task. So 4 questions. There's a video you have to watch. That video is 1 minute long, and you have 8 minutes total to assign those, grade those 4 questions. You don't have time to go find the abstraction somewhere in here, right? And you're told it has to have an abstraction. So a student who wants a 5 on the AP exam, right, is going to have to make it obvious what the abstraction is. If your programming language lets you make that obvious, that's going to help. If your programming language does not make it easy to do an abstraction, okay, then it's going to be really hard for the readers to actually find it, right? And Alice, for example, is a very popular language, okay? Alice does not really let you make procedures, right? But we learned at the reading that in Alice, you can actually create a new scene. The metaphor in Alice when you're programming is creating a video, an animation, okay? So you can create a new scene for your animation and actually write code in a given place that says when new scene starts. So you can actually write the code there and then say create scene and never actually show it. And that is the equivalent of calling a procedure, okay? So it's an abstraction for code that's taking place, but good Lord, you are really taking your life in your hands to expect the readers to actually know that, right? So stick to tried and true computer science tools, right? Something that lets you define procedures is kind of my bottom functionality, right? If it doesn't let you do that, move on to the next tool, okay? Defining a procedure, like I said, a procedure can also be called a function, can be called a method. There's a handful of things, right? And that's for a text-based language. So forward was a procedure in Java. Or defining your own block in a block-based language. So we saw all the blocks that were available. I want to make my own block. For example, I want to make a block called square, right? So that I don't have to move 100, turn 90, move 100, turn 90. I say draw square, and then it does those, right? That's an abstraction. It lets me build my own block. Then for God's sakes, that's a language that you can use. Don't use something that doesn't let you do that, okay? There are what I call data-centric abstractions. These are abstractions that kind of try to hide a bit of data, okay? And in many languages, they're kind of built around classes. That's what object-oriented programming is all about, okay? They can also be built around structures in languages that aren't object-oriented. So structures, sometimes called objects, sometimes called dictionaries, God help us, sometimes called sprites, okay? Sprites are actually, they're kind of instances of classes that you can clone. So, real computer geeks call those prototypes, okay? And so it's a prototype object-oriented system, okay? And they have to have associated functions. And again, functions is procedures or methods or whatever we want to call them, right? So that is a classic way of doing an abstraction, which means it's going to be great for AP Computer Science Principles. The readers will understand it and go, yes, I know what you did, okay? If you're in a programming language or you're evaluating a programming language and you're thinking to yourself, can I write data-centric abstractions? One of my litmus tests to kind of evaluate the language is, can I have 2 of these, right? If I can only have 1 of these, then I haven't abstracted anything. It's just D1, is D turtle, right? If I can create 2 of these, then I have an abstraction, the turtle abstraction, and here's T1, here's T2, right? So like I said, the new mechanism in Java kind of nails that. The clone mechanism in Snap nails that, okay? All right. Switching topics a little bit. This is a potpourri section, okay? I want to tell you some, quote, abstractions. Computer sciences are nitpicky. They're as bad as philosophers. We try to hide it, but we really are just as bad as the philosophers. We will argue for decades as to whether this constitutes an abstraction or not, okay? So, but these are some, quote, abstractions, okay, that the College Board expects you, and more importantly, your students to know, okay? So here's the first one, number, okay? And I have heard it said, that one of the great mathematicians of all times, Russell, okay, was also a great philosopher. When he was an undergraduate, one of his professors asked him what he wanted to do, with his life. And his answer was that he wanted to understand number, what a number was. And he also wanted to understand what a man was, that he could understand the number. And the professor said something like, good luck, kid. But one of the profound statements in there is actually number is a concept, it's an abstraction, right? And we may not think of it that way, right? Because we're so used to it. Sometimes we can't see the abstraction, right? But it's a real concept. And you can think of kindergartners or first graders that are learning the concept of number. And it's like, there are 3 things here, right? And there are 3 apples. Oh, look, 3 bananas. And we're trying to, hide the differences. Oh, these are 3 apples. These are 3 bananas. The kind of things that I'm counting is not important, right? It's just the counting process that goes 1, 2, 3. Little by little, they learn number, okay? Now, when I wrote this, I was thinking about the number 14, okay? 14 is a number. It is an abstract concept. I like to think of a Platonic concept, right? So, sometimes I picture Plato in the robes and sitting there pointing at 14, except he can't actually point at 14. So he's kind of trying to show us the shadow of 14 in the cave and saying that is what 14, well, that's an example of 14, but there's this abstract thing here that I can't quite touch, right? So that's what I want you to have in mind. And so the Romans wanted to make that more concrete, and they would say 14, or they would write 14 as XIV. And this is, Ziv, that's 14. That is actually a horrible abstraction. And I have great respect for the Romans. Okay, I'm partial. I happen to like the Greeks better, but the Romans, you got to respect them. They were terrific. They built a really powerful empire. More interestingly, they built incredible aqueducts. I mean, this were just incredible engineers. And you have to respect that, because to build those aqueducts, they must have used some math, right? Okay, and they were actually writing numbers as XIV. Think of adding XIV and XVII. Like, that's actually hard, right? Think of multiplying XIV and XVII. I don't know how they did anything. Do you have any idea how they survived?
Well, I mean, they copied.
Oh, they copied.
They regrouped it and traded symbols. I mean, it was just sort of like slashes. Slashes.
Oh, rough. I mean, that's, no wonder very few people could actually do arithmetic in antiquity, right? It's like getting a PhD these days.
Yeah, the Egyptians were smarter than the Romans, almost everything, right?
Wow. The Egyptians are something else, right?
They knew how to multiply and divide.
If you are unfortunate enough to be a prisoner being held captive somewhere, then there's a well-established way for counting the number of days, right? And so you put little marks on the wall, right? I couldn't put the slash to make the 5, so I use spaces, right? But right here is how a prisoner might write the number 14, right? So 2 groups of 5 and then a 4, right? I call those prisoner numerals. These are actually really great for incrementing. That's why prisoners like them, right? Because you just have to add 1 line and you get the next higher number. They're not too bad for adding, right? If you wanted to add numbers with this, you would get all the groups of 5. You would just copy those over. And then you have 3 here and 4 there, say. So you just move the 4, 1, 2, and then you have a group of 3, right? So you could actually add reasonably well with these. Multiplying, forget it. Division, forget it. Exponentiation, I mean, you would be hard-pressed to discover those mathematical operations with a number system that is this bad, right? So this abstraction matters. Now, this is our abstraction. And let's see, who did we steal it from? We stole it from the Arabs through, actually, even further back from India, and it got reintroduced in, introduced, I should say, in Western culture. Was it the Silk Road? Awesome.
And the Arabs in Saudi Arabia don't use Arab numerals. They use Mongolian symbols that look like teardrops.
Nice, nice. Well, the English don't use English units because they're smart. They swapped the metric long ago. So yeah, we're stuck with that. I want to say something about these kind of fancy numerals that we use. When they were introduced was actually at the time of somebody else that we all kind of love, and that's Fibonacci. And so he did some of this work of trying to understand what we could do with them. So it's kind of cool. I mean, there's a lot of connections. But anyway, this is how we do numbers in base 10. It is great for adding. It is great for multiplying and even division. We call that long division. It's really painful, and lots of kids hate it. But the fact that you can do it is absolutely amazing, right? So that's pretty nice. We actually have a really powerful number system. Now, it's not the only one that works in the same way. So I'm calling these number systems positional number systems, because the position of each digit, the 2 and the 1 matters. 1, 4 is not the same as 4, 1, right? So these are positionals. And 1, 1, 1, 0 is the way that we would write 14 in something called base 2 or binary, right? So our basic number system, decimal is base 10. We have 10 different digits, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In base 2, we have 2 different digits, 0 and 1. We always have 0. That was the great invention that made positional numbers possible, okay? And then you have as many more as you need to get to base n, right? So here is base 8. So I need 0, and then I need 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the way that we write the number 14 in base 8. Please don't let that mislead you. That is not 16, okay? That is 1, 6, which if you interpret it in base 10 is the number 16. If you interpret it in base 8 is the number 14, okay? So be careful with that. I know, for example, that language teachers have that problem because they might be teaching, say, German, and here's a word that looks exactly like it does in English. Please don't pronounce it that way, right? It's got a different pronunciation. It might have the same meaning, the same letters, but it's not pronounced the same way, right? Same thing happens in French and Spanish and so on. So I think they're calling them cognates. Is that right? Anybody know? Right?
Yeah,
so language teachers have to teach about that and actually say, look, this is a different word, okay? Even though it looks exactly like it does for you.
You know what sorprender means in Portuguese versus
What word?
Spanish? Sorprender.
Not a clue.
Right. So in Spanish it means to surprise. In Portuguese it means to wake up.
Oh, nice.
Like you just got out of bed.
Yeah. So and I guess that would be a surprise. So yeah, we have different languages. We might use the same letters, but we might mean maybe the same abstract concept pronounced differently, or maybe we mean a totally different concepts that because of culture, that's just the way they
now those two are related, right?
yeah, they are.
But
and yeah, you could probably, and I guess a linguist would be able to trace exactly when this separation happened. Okay. Here is the number, okay, and now I have to kind of stress the word number that you would use for 14 in base 16, okay? So in base 16, I need 0 because I always need 0, and then I need 15 others. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Crud, I've run out. I only have 10. So then I use letters. A, B, C, D, E, F. That's 6 letters. There we go. Base 16, okay? So 0 through 9, A through F. Those are my digits, okay? Okay, so E, if you actually do the counting, ends up being 14, okay? F is 15, A is 10, right? All of these positional numerals are really great for adding, multiplying, and so on, okay? Binary digits are really great for computers, right? And the reason they're great for computers is that back in the old days, we actually had, real physical computers that were the size of this room or bigger, right? And they used wires to like put numbers in it, right? And the wire could have a current going through it or not a current going through it, right? And that's the digital, by the way, the digital abstraction, right? That we went from voltages to just 2 possibilities, 0 and 1, right? Why is that cool? Because if I'm trying to do something like, the precise voltage, the difference between 5 volts and 4.7 volts might be too subtle in a wire that goes over the length of this room, okay? So you would have errors because, this guy over here sends a 5, that guy over there reads a 4.7, okay? And just simply because of resistance in the wire from here to there, right? On the other hand, if you know that the only numbers that we can send over the wires are 0 and 1, and that 0 is 0 volts and 1 is 5 volts, and you get a 4.7, you know they sent you 5, right? They meant to send me a 1. You don't have to guess, right? If you get 0.3, you don't say to yourself, I wonder if that's a 5 over a long distance. No, it's 0. 0 or 1. That's why the digital world works the way it does, right? So back then, we actually needed, because what if I get 2.5? Oh, do you mean to send me a 5 or a 0? Crud, now I can't tell, right? So we need to stay away from the middle of that range. So I want a big gap. 0 to 5 volts was what they used, okay? And then it works, right? Because I know that that's just 0 or 1, okay? By the way, if you know anything about electronics, 0 to 5 volts is really a big gap. And that means that those rooms were hot, okay? Because a lot of power is being dissipated. So your laptop does not use 0 or 5. A lot of textbooks still use 0 or 5 out of tradition, right? But your laptop is running like 0 to 0.8, okay? And when you have a new generation, oh, I have chips that run cooler and faster and so on, 0 to 0.7, right? They just keep making that gap smaller because we have better sensors, right? But, it's still a separation, 0 to 1. So since 0 to 1 makes sense for digital computers, right? That's what the word digital means, okay? Then the numbers that computers use have those 2 digits. That's it, 0 and 1. That's why computers use binary, okay? The College Board wants you to understand the difference between numbers and numerals. And they want you to understand that the way that you represent the number is by having a lot of bits, okay? And each one is a 0 or a 1. Okay, so they really will ask the students to convert numbers to binary and back. Okay, that is something they just need to learn how to do. All right, and it takes 1 day to teach them. Right, it's just one of those things that I actually asked the question, why do people need to learn this? Right, but it's part of the culture of computing, so we're still making students learn it. Okay, they will also want you to learn a little bit of magic. And a little bit of magic is that suppose that you had a really large alphabet, okay? Let's say you had 100 different letters and numbers, okay? Then you could actually write numbers in base 100, okay? Right? We would just need to go A through Z, and then I need 100 of those, right? Now, if you were to write numbers in base 100, then, for example, what would be the representation of 148? Okay. Well, it would be the representation for 1, which is some digit, probably the number 1, right? And then the representation for 48. Okay. Right. And that's simply because in base 100, right, each digit corresponds to 2 digits in base 10. Right? When that relationship is integer to integer, 1 to 2, right? So 2 digits in base 10, 1 digit in base 100, then conversions between bases are trivial, right? You just go 2 at a time and then convert it, right? Or this is the 27 digit. Oh, that's 27 in the base 10. You simply split 27 into those 2 components, right? So converting between base 10 and base 100 is trivial, okay? With computers, the computers are working in base 2. Here's a bad thing. For every digit in base 10, you need, roughly speaking, 10 digits in base 2. Okay, that's not exact. That is not exact. Okay, I'm sorry, let me take that back. For every 3 digits in base 10, you need about 10 digits in base 2, and that's not exact. Okay, so what computer scientists did to avoid having all those long strings of 1s and 0s was they went 3 at a time, okay? And 3 at a time is base 8, okay? So you run into base 8 in computing. You used to run into it all the time because there were computers that actually grouped bits into bytes, and a byte is just a group of bits, okay? And back then, we were grouping them 3 bits into a byte. So it was base 8, octal, okay? Today, we typically group bits 8 bits at a time into a byte, okay? That would be base 256. So you need 256 different digits. Okay, we can't do that. So instead of thinking of it as 8 bits, we think of it as 2 groups of 4 bits, okay? And groups of 4 bits corresponds to base 16, okay? So how do I convert between binary and base 16? I just memorize You know, like for example, 1110 is E. 1010 is A, and so on, right? And so I just go 4 bits at a time and change it, right? If I'm going from base 16 to base 2, each letter or digit corresponds to 4 bits, and that's how the conversion goes. Okay, so that's something that that you'll have to teach your students. Okay, and there's material for that. I mean, it's I don't want to spend the time here, but I just want you to know about it. Okay, now here are some other things that the College Board wants you to know. I talked to you about groups of 8 bits are called bytes, and you can either write them using 8 bits or 2 hex digits, right? 2 groups of 4, and because mathematically is because 2 raised to the power 4 is equal to 16. That works. Base 2, 4 bits is base 16. Okay. What's special about bytes, 8-bit bytes, is that they can be used to represent letters and special characters. Okay. So back in the late 50s, early 60s, when people were doing this, they were working on computers, very, very expensive pieces of equipment. They were working mostly in the United States. Okay. They were talking to each other mostly in English. And so they thought that there were only 26 letters. You did have to have upper and lowercase, so that was 52. You needed a space, a period, a comma, semicolon, exclamation mark, question mark. Okay. And then you also needed some extra characters, like please go to the next line. You know, back with typewriters, and you had a handle that you pulled and went to the next line. Okay. Please move the thing that's typing to the front. That's called a carriage return, right? And so we needed a carriage return and a new line, right? And so, well, you needed a bit more than 64. So they counted and went, oh, we need 7 bits. Okay. And so they built an encoding system where every letter was one of those 7 bits. Okay. And as an example, 01000001 represents the letter A. Okay. When I started in computing, I actually had to know these, because the way that you debugged was you saw what was in the computer and a printout, and then had to go through it. Oh, here's where this variable is a 12. I wanted it to be a 50, right? And so that's my bug. That's how you found it, right? Today, we don't do that, so you don't have to know that anymore, right? But the College Board still wants you to appreciate that. Okay, so since we're on the topic and we're talking about all inclusive, the College Board only expects you to know what I said up to this point, but I might as well mention the fact that there are people in this world that speak languages other than English. I know, it's amazing. They use letters that we don't use, you know. Like for example, I was really surprised when I learned English that the N with a thing on top of it is called an enya. It doesn't exist, right? So it's like, wow. You know, those people are weird. I swapped teams, but you know, then there's the French who put commas underneath C's. Who does that? Okay,
Portuguese.
The Portuguese do too. Yeah, we're kind of close to France. So anyway, there's they actually ran out of letters, right? I'm sorry, they did not run out of letters. They ran out of binary codes they could put in 8 bits, right? That's why European documents are not encoded in ASCII. Okay, European documents are usually encoded in something called UTF-8. Okay, and your computer actually understands that just fine, and it can open one of those documents, and some magic sequence actually means euro, right? And it'll put up the symbol for euro, just like we have a $sign on our keyboard. Okay, that's where that comes from. So you can appreciate that. There are other languages where they don't have so much letters as maybe syllables or even entire words. Okay, and I'm thinking in particular of some Asian languages. So you could be looking at thousands of different letters that you need. So even UTF-8 is not enough there. And so there are more. What are we going to do? UTF-8, what's the next one? Yeah, UTF-16. So, you know, we need more letters to be able to do this, okay? So that's where that comes from. Like I said, I say that only because students, it's an opportunity. You know, this is one of my policies when I teach a class. If I'm right next to a really cool fact, I don't want to just keep driving. I want to show it, because that's part of being able to appreciate what it is that you're learning. And one of the big messages that I want to give high school students, college students about computing is that this stuff is a tool, right? And it is a tool to help people. And since people come in all sorts of different, shapes and languages and so on, then the tool needs to adapt, right? And it's simply an accident of history, and one that is somewhat embarrassing in retrospect, right? That we kind of invented computers as if everybody spoke English only, right? That was all that was necessary. And I can only say that just in case anybody thinks that was some kind of a racism or anything like that. No, it wasn't. It was the fact that 7 bits was a lot to devote. Storage capacity in those computers was really tiny. That's why they made such fascinating decisions as years. We only need 2 digits for that, right? Because, they're doing this in the 50s and 60s, so all you need is 53, 54, right? Who's going to put 19, right? This is just fine. We only need 2 digits for that. And then, of course, that became the Y2K problem, which is everybody panicking. Oh, my God, what happens when we roll over to 00, right? So it's in that scope of stupidity, not in the scope of, there are no French, there are no Germans. No, it's different kind of error. Okay, something else they want you to learn. They want you to learn about logical operations. What are logical operations? Those are operations like arithmetic operations. What do arithmetic operations work on? Numbers, right? 2 plus 3, 2 times 3, 2 plus parentheses 3 minus 4, right? Those are all arithmetic operations. Logical operations, sometimes also called Boolean operations because of another accident of history, okay? And, or, not, right? So it is raining and I don't have an umbrella, right? I am hungry and the restaurants are closed, right? That's and, right? By the way, the restaurants are closed. I could also say that and not the restaurants are open, right? So these are my kind of connectives, logical connectives, and, or, and not. And if you're a computer scientist, you're going to use those a lot. If you do some casual programming, you're going to use those a lot. Simply because you want to be able to say things like, I'm going to add 1 to this counter, but only if this condition is true. And the condition might be, for example, the current value of it is less than 100, so that I don't exceed that. Or the current value of this is less than 100, and the current value of that is less than 40, right? So that might mean the next pixel, right? That's how I actually have to break it into cases, okay? One of the things they want you to know, and again, this reinforces the idea of abstractions, is that the logical abstractions, okay, things like and, or, and not, can actually be implemented using electricity, okay? So those first computers were those, crazy guys that were, by the way, they're called engineers. So they're next door. But anyway, these crazy guys that were building these huge machines to do things like, what is it they wanted to do? Figure out how to bomb the Nazis, right? So calculating, what's the right time to drop the bomb so that it hits that target. I mean, that's what we use computers for. They actually would run cables, right? And so remember, 5 volts, right? This other one is 5 volts. I want to know when both of those cables have 5 volts running through those. And they would do a little circuit over here, right? Using things like vacuum tubes, okay? That would put out 5 volts on this side if both of those had 5, but nothing out there if either one of these had 0, or at least very low, right? And they actually didn't realize that they were doing logic, okay? They thought they were building, they thought they were building really complicated circuits that could do ballistics so that they could figure out where missiles struck. One of the latecomers, relatively speaking, to building computers was a guy called Johnny von Neumann. And you'll run into him in a million different contexts. He invented game theory, basically. He did all sorts of fancy stuff. And he looked at those physical devices and he scratched his head a little bit and went, you know what? I had a student come visit me a while back called Alan Turing, another brilliant guy. And he had this weird idea about this mathematical machine, not a machine at all, an abstraction, right? That could manipulate characters on a big tape. And he's like, what a dumb idea. But anyway, he came and he talked here at Princeton for a while, the Institute for Advanced Studies. And I'm looking at these wires and thinking, shoot, that's what those are, right? And so he actually invented what was for many years called the von Neumann computer model, right? And a von Neumann computer model is one that has a central processing unit. You call it a CPU. It has memory. Okay. And anybody have a computer around here that doesn't have a CPU or memory? I don't think so. That's why we don't call them von Neumann computers anymore, because there are no others. Okay. That was just one of those incredible moments when the right abstraction was found, right? How can we think about these wires and vacuum tubes and so on in such a way that we make the engineering easier so we can build more powerful machines? Use math, use logic, right? And then when you realize that these things, by the way, they're called gates, okay? So is a gate like an AND gate? What is an AND gate? Some kind of funny thing that you plug in 2 wires in the back and a wire in the front. That could be a vacuum tube in the good old days. Later, they became transistors. And today, my God, there's just a little bit of silicon, and there's, millions of those into a chip, right? So that's, but they're still gates, right? So the College Board wants you to recognize gates as kind of what connects logic math with hardware, okay? So there's really an interesting abstraction happening there, okay? Now, the other abstraction they want you to understand, and like I said, this is real potpourri because they don't have anything in common other than you can look at them as abstractions, okay, is the notion of a computer simulation, okay? Whenever I talk about computer simulations, I use 2 examples. Example number 1 was the original computer simulation, and that is traffic in a city, okay? So people are thinking, we're going to add this new highway, but we're going to spend this much money for the highway, and we're going to get away with it because it's going to reduce traffic by 10%. Sure, you build it and traffic doesn't go down by 10%. So it is actually a true fact that they were doing this in Phoenix and they were getting money from some source, I don't know, probably the federal government, and they needed to show that was going to work. Folks in Los Alamos, which is relatively close, I mean, not at all if you live in Phoenix or in Los Alamos, but from here is pretty much the same. Actually undertook that problem and programmed a computer to simulate cars flowing through the city and showed that if you added this highway, the traffic would go down by some percentage point. I'm sorry?
Do you know when was that? 70s, 90s,
It was
80s?
about early 70s. I don't know the exact date, but it was right around it,
I have a relative who did the same sort of thing for ambulances in New York City.
In New York.
And they found a way, fire stations and ambulances. And it was much more efficient if they actually closed down lots of fire stations.
Really?
And the city decided not to do it because it wasn't politically, I mean, all those people who worked in all those fire stations, it wouldn't be a good thing.
Right. Well, that happens, right? So actually that brings me up to the next thing that the College Board really wants you to understand about simulations. Oh, by the way, I skipped my second example. The second one that I always give is weather, right? And, or a better term for that is climate, right? We have these climate simulations that are very, very important in trying to tell us what's happening to the planet. And
Troy is adding that they do a lot of simulation at Guernsey with the soldiers.
right, exactly, right? I mean, there's simulation is like one of the go-to applications of computing, okay? The very last chemistry Nobel Prize was actually given to chemists who use computers to simulate bonding in molecules, right? So so these are not the kind of chemists that you think of when you think chemists, the white lab coat and the test tubes and Bunsen burners and those things. They're chemists that are typing into a computer, right? So so it's computer simulations, okay? Now, the thing that they want you to really appreciate about this is that in order to be able to do a simulation, you have to ignore details, okay? So here is a simple example. Let's say that you want to build a model of the solar system, right? And lots of classrooms have model of the solar system, okay? That's really nice, except it's probably not to scale, right? Because if you actually try to build a model of the solar system up to scale, and let's say you wanted to be able to see the Earth, right? It's like, okay, so the Earth is the size of a ping pong ball. Like, right, so where is Mars? Next room, right? It's like, oh, I can't put that model here. Okay, so let's make the Earth really tiny. Then you can't see it, right? To actually have a faithful reproduction of like the solar system with planets that you can see, you need a city to be able to walk around. It's like, the other one is 10 blocks that way. So, so you don't do that, right? You ignore things like this size because you want to keep track of the relative distances, for example, right? You're going to do a simulation about, let's say, the way that a rolling cart rolls down an inclined plane. This is physics 101, right? Then you're going to have things like mass, gravity, coefficient of friction, and run, and that will work, okay? If you find a physicist and prod him or her a little bit and say, explain friction, they might mumble things like electromagnetic attraction between, the surface atoms. You go, oh, let me add that to my simulation. No, don't do that. It becomes so much more complex and it doesn't actually give you any better data, right? Newton's laws of gravitation, great simulation of the solar system. That's what we used to fly to the moon. Einstein had a very different idea of how gravity works. We don't use that to get to the moon. We might need it to go to Mercury. But again, simulations ignore certain details. In fact, they should ignore as many details as possible so that they are feasible, right? Those chemists that I mentioned that actually got the Nobel Prize, the reason that they did was that they added a lot of those details, right, to actually see how it really works. And so what that means is that they can model the way very tiny molecules bond, right? But they can't talk about the way, the world really works, right? Too many details. Okay, so that's the thing that happens in a simulation. So they're going to ask questions which are like, what is true about a computer simulation? Like, for example, we're going to simulate a bridge. One of the answers is, actually, they might ask, what's the limitation of a simulation? I'm trying to decide whether to build a bridge. One of those will be, you have to build the bridge before you can build the simulation. Okay, good God, no, right? Is this bridge actually going to be able to handle the traffic going through it? Let's build it and run some people through it, some cars, and let's see if it falls, right? And then we'll do a simulation. No, we do the simulation first. Okay, so that's always one of the possibilities. Another one is the simulation can't handle all the details, like the color of the bridge. Okay, that's a limitation, right? Simulation is not necessarily accurate. Okay, that's a limitation, and so on, right? But they want to get at that concept, right? I use simulations to help me understand and learn about the real world, right? And of course, they're not exact. All right, so in that kind of thing, I've been telling you about this kind of list of things that you need to know to pass AP Computer Science Principles. I want to talk a little bit more generally about assessment, okay? So assessment is divided into 2 parts or 3 parts, depending on how you count. One part is the actual exam that you take on, I think it's first or second week of May, right? And that exam has a whole bunch of questions that is multiple choice. Okay, so I believe 75 questions, but that might vary. And that's multiple choice, and it's scanned from a machine. It gets scored automatically. Exciting, right? Now, what kind of questions are we going to ask? We'll talk more about that as we go along. In the big idea of creativity, no questions show up in the multiple choice. That's why we didn't talk about it. Okay. In abstraction, they do show up, right? And what kind of questions? Precisely these. Some abstractions that you and your students need to know. So they might ask, I hate this question, right? Here are some letters, they have this ASCII code, like A is equal to 65 or 64, something like that, okay? Which letter has the most ones in its binary representation? It's like, oh, geez. I have to take this, convert it to the number 64, 65, or whatever it is, convert that to binary, and then count. This has 1, 1. The next one's a 0, that doesn't count. This is a 1. Okay, 3, right? Oh, that means that the one that had the most ones is D. Okay, that's the choice, right? So they'll have questions like that, which I think is just to annoy the kids. But if you answer it correctly, you really know how to do binary conversions and how to do letters, okay? They're going to ask other questions about converting gates. Like, for example, they might show you an AND gate, right? And one of the wires coming in says true and the other one says X. And then the output of that AND gate is connected to a NOT, and then the output of that is connected to an OR. And the output, they'll say, oh, the output is a true. So what can you tell me about X? And one of the answers, multiple choice, might be, it has to be true, it has to be false, it doesn't matter if it's true or false. This can't possibly work because the output can never be true right at the bottom, so you're tricking me, right? That might be the choices. And so that's something that, again, the students need to know. And they'll have lots of simulation type questions, right? You know, I want to build a simulation. Why is it bad? Because you have to build it before, etc. So those are the kinds of assessment questions that they'll see. Now, the other thing they have to do is they have to do 2 performance tasks. One is called create, basic concept, write a program, talk about it, okay? One is called explore, basic concept, learn about something in computing that interests you. Like, for example, I like music, so I read about how music applies to, computing applies to music, and then write about it, okay? That's basically the ideas. So in the create task, you will actually have to create a program, right? That means, well, you'll have to build an abstraction, okay? Now, there is great latitude on what they consider an abstraction. And there's actually debates. There have been debates over the last 5 years. And if the student uses a variable, like for example, X in his or her code, is that an abstraction? And you'll find people who say yes, because the X is storing a number, for example, and numbers are abstracted because they're, you know, numbers, and they're probably being written as literal. So if they say X equals 1, 4, abstraction took place. The College Board has almost unanimously decided that's not what they mean by your program must include an abstraction, so that doesn't count, okay? Here is what they're asking for, okay? And this is a little loosey-goosey, okay? Because it's hard to really put a box around it and say abstraction took place, abstraction did not take place, but that's exactly what the readers are doing with a rubric, okay? So yes, it's delicate. I mean, we had, oh yes, okay. Yeah, let's stop in like 5 minutes, okay? Yeah, okay. So anyway, that's the that's what we're after, right? Just using an abstraction does not count. Okay. So remember how we talked about the turtle was this great abstraction? Moving a turtle around does not count as creating an abstraction. Okay, so that won't get accepted. Okay, so somehow you have to show that you built an abstraction. If your language does not let you define your own procedures and blocks, then it's harder to show that an abstraction took place, right? So don't use that language. Okay, you know, pick a language. There are plenty of languages that are accessible to high school students that let you build your own block, let you build your own procedure. Use one of those, right? If that means that your favorite language is XYZ and you used it for the 4th grade students and it was a success, and now you're trying to migrate to AP, but XYZ doesn't let you do procedures, tough. XYZ is not the right language, okay? Now, I have seen solutions turned in using, well, I actually saw agent cubes, which is familiar to at least a couple of people in this room. Yeah, one of them is wearing the t-shirt. You know, I saw solutions in LabVIEW, which I wouldn't expect high school students to know about, but maybe their dad's an engineer, and so that's what they did. I saw solutions in really crazy things, right? It is possible. But I know, for example, that the student, I didn't grade this one, but the student that submitted an agent sheets thing did not get the points for abstraction because there was no abstraction that was immediately visible. They also didn't get the points for algorithms, which we'll talk about tomorrow, but that's why you want to choose a language that makes it obvious, okay? In some languages like Python or Java, you build classes for abstraction. If you do that, you are golden. I mean, it's easy to say, look, here's my abstraction. In other languages, you can get away with it. In other ways, my favorite way is simply to build a new block, build a new procedure. That nails it. There are some subtle ways of doing it. Like I have a list of things, right? And my list always look like the first thing is a string, like a name, Ruben. The second thing is a number, which is the age. The third thing is another string, which is the university's identifier, right? Well, if you have a lot of those, then you built an abstraction. You built a employee abstraction, for example, using lists and putting things in numbers. The first one is this, the second one is that. You know what, if that's all you got, that's all you got. I recommend not using that as your example of abstraction, right? Because you're hoping to have a good reader. It's better to just assume, here, it's a function. And they'll go, yep, Abstraction, move on to the next row in the rubric. There's 4 rows, they're only spending at most 8 minutes, right? And they already spent the minute watching your video, right? So they've only got 7 left. They don't need to hunt for the abstraction, right? Or even think about, does this count? Is it a low, a medium, or high? No. Function high, done, okay? So that's what I recommend. What's that?
Sort of sad.
It's sort of sad because I know, and by the way, the readers and more importantly, the chief reader and the question leaders and so on are really aware of the fact that, as they put it, most of the students invested a great deal of time in this. But it's just, how do you operate at scale, right? So that's all you have. And if you understand that that's what's happening, then you can deal with it, right? You can help your students deal with it. I felt really bad for the students who didn't seem to know that. And little things that we would ask for, like put a box around your abstraction, literally just put a marker and put borders around it, and they wouldn't do that. Instead they would give you the entire code, or my favorite is when we put a box around the entire code and say, abstraction is taking place. Okay, so now I need to think, is that a little bit of abstraction, medium bit of abstraction, a high bit of abstraction? Really hard to make those calls. Help your kids get 5s, right? Make it easy on the readers. So anyway, that's really what I have to say about abstraction.
Do you think they're going to have guides? I mean, for example, for the national boards, people have organized moments when you consult with other people.
Yeah, we actually have rubrics, okay? And I can share with you, I asked this, okay? So I can share with you the actual rubrics that we used for scoring the exams. And under the SAT category, there are official rubrics that are out there, right? But the problem is that they can be ambiguous, right? So the difference between a low and a medium will be that the abstraction was talked about generally, whereas in a medium, the abstraction is talked about specifically. Okay, what does that mean, right? So we had more detailed rubrics that would say, this is what to look for. And so I can actually share those with you. And by the way, depending on how you use those rubrics, you could give a kid a 1 or a 3. And that's really what it came down to. It's painful because, Lynn and I might be applying the same rubric. You would hope that the difference of opinion is between a 1 and a 2, or a 2 and a 3, not between a 1 and a 3, right? So I bring that up because we were explicitly told, do not make sure that whoever you share this with understands that this may not be the exact same rubrics we use next year, okay? The overall rubric, the public one, will not change, okay? The hidden rubric that helps the readers apply the overall rubric might change. In fact, I guarantee you it will, okay? So you don't want to apply it so carefully, right? That, I call that overfitting, right? It's like you will pass this class, but only if they use this specific rubric. Like the previous rubric from a year ago had in there, in order to count, you have to have at least 1 loop, okay? And at least 1 if statement. So I had a student who was writing code that basically said, forward, left, forward, left, forward, left, right? And I'm not kidding. There were about 30 statements like that, okay? Did you see a loop? Did you see an if statement? No, right? Okay. So after about 30 of that, they had x is equal to 1, while x is less than 2. Forward, left. If x is less than 2, then x equals x plus 1. There was a for loop, there was an if statement, right? And the loop only executed once, right? And the kid knew this. And in their write-up, they actually said, they're talking about, here's this. This is important because if you don't have this, then it will be stuck in there an infinite amount of time. And I was just like, wow, that's, I appreciate that. And I have bad news for you. They changed the specific rubrics. They're no longer asking for this. Right now, they're asking for something else which you don't have. Okay. Therefore, it was 0. Right. And it would have been a 3 last year. So, you have to be careful, right? Think about the public rubric, and the other one is just an example of how to apply it. Okay. So, it helps you understand how we do it, but don't try to overfit. All right, I think we desperately need a break. Break for about what, 15? Well, let's make it 10 minutes, okay?
And then we'll wrap up. Right?
And then we'll wrap up, okay? And what I want to do is give them the homework for overnight. All right.
Okay, you've been following, right? Have you been following all of this?
Some of it.
Some of it.
So
Ask me.
I'm getting the impression from listening to you that
From where?
for the test, it would
I
be
haven't looked at
best
my email.
in an introductory
Well,
class
maybe
to
you should.
pick a language,
So
like you said,
remember when
select
you
a language
apply
here.
for the
Yeah.
That you pick a
residency
language and
anyway, we're
make
trying
sure
to
that
figure
the
out
kids are
something
well
with
versed in
residence.
that language. We can do lots
We
of things
don't
in
know if
that
it's going
language.
to
False.
False, good,
False.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So then the
But-
second part of that was going
They
to be,
have to have
are they better
certain
served
amount of
if in an introductory
logic
class you are
that
exposing them
for
to different kinds of
for
language?
False.
and I
False.
think, you know,
We have enough.
I think we have enough to pay for.
So-
I think so too.
For Hoda.
Oh.
Yeah, so did Ruben.
I want students to know the difference between blocks and text-based languages, okay? And in the AP exam, in the multiple choice, they will see questions of the sort. Here's a robot. I'm programming the robot, and I'm programming it, and to get a section of code from a text-based language. While this, if this, so it might be something like, while I can go forward, move forward, if I can move left, and there's a big loop. Where does it end in this maze? And so you say it ends at this position. Okay? So you have to be able to read text-based languages, but not much of them, right? Just tiny stuff. They might actually show you a block-based language that has the same algorithm that I just described and say, what does it have? So they have to be able to read both, okay? But the basics, they don't have to be, like if you take the AP Computer Science A, which is a much older exam, right? They actually, you cannot pass that if you're not really good at Java. Okay, I mean, there's just no way to pass that if you're not super good at Java, because that's what the test is, right? This one is not like that, right? So the exam is very open, right? You do have to understand lists or arrays. You have to understand loops. You have to understand if statements. You have to understand variables, okay? And if you do that, you'll define.
So what is the best, I mean, if you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with my year with kids? Is it best, then I guess the heart of my question is still, are the kids better served if they understand one language really well and maybe know that there are others out there?
Right.
Or are they better served if you say, okay, I want to spend a quarter on Java and I want to spend a quarter on
I recommend strongly against that.
Okay.
And we're actually going to do a little bit of that because what we want the students to learn is that programming is an abstraction over syntax, right? And so the syntax could be blocks or the syntax could be Python. So there's a module in this curriculum where what they'll do is they'll actually have, first they learn how to program using blocks, and then it'll be like hand translate that to Python, right? And that's similar to what I did today, where I had Java and blocks, and you just and it's really a salesmanship job where you're gonna sell the kids on the idea that they could learn Python if they wanted to, right? We don't actually teach them that, but just kind of say, oh, you may have heard, right, of these other languages, and you may even run into people who say, if Python is the only language you should know, right? It's okay, because with what you learned in this class, you could go off and do that, right? And the College Board really wants you to understand that. I'll talk more about that when I talk about the programming abstraction. Programming big idea, because almost all of the questions, I exaggerate, but so many of the questions are of the form, Sally wants to write a program to do this, right? Should you pick a programming language and the correct answer is almost always, it doesn't matter. Only rarely does it actually matter, right? It's like she wants to do something that will work on the web, and you're like, oh, JavaScript, right? But almost always it's any of them will work, right? And they'll have like, should you use the text-based language because text-based languages are more efficient? No, false, right? Right. So,
but are there not some programs that, like, just on our little blog thing there, somebody was saying like Python and GIS, if you're going to be using GIS, you're going to want to pair that with Python because it is more adept at whatever
yeah, and generally speaking, that's false. Okay, I mean it's something that people will say, and typically what it means is, I really like Python, and I don't blame them. Python is a nice language. Python has modules that talk to GIS, right? But if you were to use Java, then you would use the Java framework that does GIS, right? If you're writing an app for a phone, like this phone, right? This is an iPhone, and you want to do something that is GPS aware, which a lot of people do, right? You know, that's GIS-y stuff, right? But it's actually written in Swift, which is a different textual language, because that's what runs in this thing, you know, so you don't have much of a choice, right? So honestly, that is a war that colleges fight. And if you really want to just disrupt a computer science faculty meeting, go in there and just say, what programming language should we teach the freshmen when they come in? Nobody can decide that. MIT used to teach Scheme, they switched to Python. Berkeley used to teach Scheme, they switched to Snap.
It's the most important thing for kids to understand is that once you kind of get ideas, you can apply it into any language. That's what you're trying to say.
That's the lesson, right? That's the more important lesson. And you know, kids especially will make that mistake. They'll be like, I know how to program because I'm really good at JavaScript, right? And to me, those two sentences are almost contradictory, or at least relevant, right? You know, I know great programmers who know squat about JavaScript, and I've seen lots of people who know JavaScript can't program, right? You know, so that's what I'm like. Yeah, so, yeah. You, no, and that's why we're
Choose your
here.
language carefully. That line.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so, but then on the other hand, when you're showing them both, which I thought was really cool.
Exactly. So I will, I mean, I'll share my biases with you, okay? Languages like Alice are horrible, right? And it's because they're great at what they do. But what they do is they introduce young students to using computers for something creative, right? And that makes them feel good, right? Is that a great thing? Absolutely. I want them to do that. I want them to learn that you can type a few things and the camera moves, right? That you can type a few things and you can make a fish, you know, move their fin, right? And then if you can move the, then you have the dorsal fin and then move these fins, you can actually make it look like a swimming. That is powerful stuff, right? Absolutely do that. But if you're trying to teach college level programming, no, you know, it's not appropriate for that, right? Python is, JavaScript is. I mean, you could use any of those, right? But then I come from the other angle, which is I don't want it for just the geeks, right? You know, I mean, shoot, send them to Java, right? You know, but for everybody else, what are we going to do? And that's where I like this drag and drop that actually do have the power of textual language behind it. That's my bias.
Thank you.
So let's just probably fill all that out next week.
Yeah, I'm going to take something with Ruben. So Ruben, I think Lynn and myself, we agree that we should have enough funds for 3 people to stay in a hotel, or 2. Because, you know, the expenses.
Still can't find the people who are in charge. They're not responding. They don't answer the phones.
Yeah.
God, that is so frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I tried to do this too before I left, and since I was going to be gone, that's why I said, you know, and they're not there.
Yeah.
So
and the enrollment people are not there. Debbie and everything is messed up. So, but they stayed in a hotel yesterday, and I think that's
some people
fine.
Stayed, like Sarah stayed with her friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's,
well,
if
that
they need
works,
hotel,
hotels work.
we should be able to reimburse for a hotel. It's going to be more expensive.
Cost us a lot more, but it's just the only thing we can do.
It's just a few. It's just a few, as opposed to having 20 in dorms.
And next week, for example, Sarah goes back to, and she'll log in.
She'll log in. So.
Yeah.
So
we
just
might
have
be
maybe
fine. Yeah. The other thing I
2
want
or
to get
3.
done is the. I mean, as soon as we can get these, you know, it looks like that problem is solved, right? Enrollment is almost solved. You know,
and people are mailing.
People are mailing this. Yeah. If you can do me a big favor, because I need to get back to the JAC with this, is the count of students, right?
The account of students.
Yeah, how many students are taking it, right? And I have a number, which is what you can get to on the wiki, right? But I told them.
Who's distant and who's not.
Oh, that's great. But mostly I just want to know, so, you know, the real count, because I know that some people couldn't make it. So they're in my mailing list, but they're not.
So what I've been doing is just taking screen captures of who's online.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So we have,
beautiful.
so I walked over to the enrollment, I walked over 10 forms yesterday. I have another one today filled out. I scanned everything, so I have
And
electronic
you
copies
have
of it.
one more that I just sent you.
Yeah, so that's 11.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not sure about it. Maybe I didn't see that yet. But yeah, so did any one of you do this? Hotels used to charge the department instead of people's cards.
You can
So-
get them to charge a department.
Is that okay?
I think
Does
so.
that
So
still,
long as
you understand what I'm saying? Instead of putting it on their card,
Oh. Yeah, I think we
The
can do that.
hotel.
Yeah.
I know
that's-
we can
That
do
should be doable. Yeah.
okay. And Lori should be able to take care of that. Okay.
Well, just let her know that, you know, when those things come in, what
What a grand.
file, yeah, what kind of account number.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
No, that's fine. Next week.
I'm like doing it 5 years. I invited you over the last two. Open invitation. Show up, just show up. You can't walk your happy tail across the street, really? You can't do it. And then we were not talking like that. I said, yes, I did. I said, you feel sick of hearing me. Everybody else does all these wonderful things that you
Control is there, okay. Okay, so thanks for waiting. We seem to take longer and longer breaks, but what you see now on the Zoom screen is the homework. We'd like you to look at, and again, like I said, I'll send you a summary email with the link again and the description. Oops, can you move me back? Okay, so this is just the SNAP curriculum. I think you've gotten links to it before, but I'll link again. And what we want you to do is go through that lab number 3. Now, if you know, there's absolutely no reason why you can't go back to 1 and 2. 1 is just like the hour of code, and 2.
Actually,
sort
1
of,
and 2 are very similar to
yeah.
the hour of code. Yeah.
So between the 2 of them, they're like the hour of code, and we're going to look at 3 and 4 tomorrow. So if you can go through 3, or at least as much of 3 as you're able, that would be a good way to prepare for tomorrow. And I'm sorry we didn't talk about the reading, but we'll do that next time first thing. Yes, you got a question here.
What's our homework?
Your homework is to, on your own, go through Programming Lab 3. The 1 and 4, the ones that are showing here. But we'll come back and look at them tomorrow.
You'll send us a link.
Yes. And this is the official curriculum out of Berkeley. That's what we're using.
Yeah, that's what the students would do, and you know.
So you're gonna send us a link to be able to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, well, anybody have last minute questions? Just a minute, let's see. Oh, can you unmute yourself?
I am unmuted. Yeah, I'm not muted.
All right, well.
We were when we were talking among ourselves.
Right. How about this? Now I've unmuted myself. This is Lynn speaking as Lynn, not as Ruben.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay, well, people have to go and people should go. So go home, you'll get a link and a summary. We'll see you tomorrow.
And that's gonna come in our personal email?
It's going to come in however they've been coming in. I'm using the same distribution list. And if you want to add a second email to that, just let me know.
I've gotten.
Here, I can look it up and see which one is yours. On the distribution list.
I've gotten one email from you. Yeah, the Zoom address thing that came out. Okay, I think I.
Okay, so which email, how does it start? I've got to scan. Okay.
I think you've got it in there. Because I got your Zoom email.
Okay. There it is. Yes, I have that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
You sent it already?
Okay, no, I haven't sent it already. But I'll also send the link to the recorded class, assuming that we have successfully recorded this class.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to end the meeting.
Okay, all right. So